All right, welcome everyone to the symposium on our most recent course, Heidegger's Essence of Technology. I'm very happy that so many of you are here and so many of you will present tonight. So I think Ravi this time is first. We'll look forward to your presentation. I'll make you
Great.
go on the big screen in a second. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for a great course. My presentation is called Gestell in the Life World, Heidegger's Question Concerning Technology in the Social Media Age. Despite being the characteristic phenomenon of our age, we still seem to be continually baffled by technology. It is the most familiar yet the most strange thing to us. On the one hand, our cars and computers appear as pure tools, ready to hand as Heidegger identifies in Being and Time. We treat them as extensions of our intention so that we don't even notice that they're there. The computer is there when we want to type or access our bank statement. The car is there when we require transport. And it's only when these things fail us that they call out to us in their character as objects, revealed as mere hunks of glass and steel or silicon before us. Moments like these lead us to step back and wonder at the seemingly unnatural condition we find ourselves in. Nowhere is this more clear than the latest baffling technologies, social media and AI. They expose us to a universe of behaviors and a social tempo that seem wholly novel. When we are in the flow of using them, nothing feels more obvious, but when we step back from them, we realize how confusing they are to us. Technologically mediated civilization is a state of being that intuitively feels different to us than the state of nature. The computer collapses our contact with other people, allows access to infinite information that is not present in the forest or the lake. The car unlocks transportation power, which is infinitely greater than the power of our own 2 feet. Power grids allow for light that mimics the sun. In response to this idea that modern technology separates us from the past as by a gulf, critics, and especially proponents of the modernization process, often note that man has always been a tool-making animal. The essence of humanity in this view is to make tools that afford certain purposes. They may cite the Acheulean hand axe, the windmill, or even language itself. Each of these is a tool that humanity has wielded for a certain end. Yet this does not fully explain things to us. There is no sense that the windmill or the axe is baffling in the same way. Thus, it does not seem that it is simply the quality of tool-making that defines modern technology. Modern technology seems to be something different than pre-modern technology. Heidegger identifies this as standing reserve in his essay, The Question Concerning Technology. What is characteristic of modern technology is that it seeks to order all beings as resources that are on tap for productive use so that they can fulfill other aims. Once resources are stored towards one aim, the aims can be chained into a sequence of aims that all have the hidden purpose of obtaining more standing reserve. Heidegger calls the mode of being that seeks to order beings this way Gestell. A hand axe allows for the butchering and chopping of wood, but it leaves the resources of nature as they are. It simply serves as a tool that enhances the capability of the human hand to cleave. A windmill allows grain to be ground to the power of the wind. There is no storing and deploying of resources here. There is a simple harvest of the wind and even an employment of it, but it does not appropriate the energy of the wind into a separate reserve of energy that is then deployed towards other aims. Moreover, there's a challenging in the Gestell that is not there in the pre-modern technologies. In pre-modern technology, there is a development of a harvesting, even a refining, but it does not press nature to give up its secrets as an interrogation so that it can be ordered into the scheme of standing reserve. Writing in the 1950s, Heidegger characterized the epoch he lived in as oriented by Gestell towards revealing beings as standing reserve, leading to the rational scientific society of the time. However, there have been many changes since that time which may cause us to wonder whether Gestell is still the paradigm through which being is operating. With YouTube radicalization, talking machines, and cancellation mobs, we wonder if Gestell is still the mode of being we find ourselves in. By examining these latest waves of technology, we will see that Gestell has moved on from the world of atoms to ordering the life world itself. The 20th century Gestell paradigm saw the development of industry and transportation. The factory was perfected, mechanized, and now automated so that we now have dark factories, self-optimizing robotic assemblages that do not even need human involvement. For all the talk about renewed technical progress in deep tech, as identified by writers such as Patty McCormick and Jason Crawford, these are just further developments of the existing technological paradigm. Instead of manufacturing drugs on Earth, we can manufacture them in space. Instead of harvesting energy from a hydroelectric plant, we scale a fleet of nuclear reactors. The new deep tech movement, while energized by new software-enabled processes, does not represent the development of a new mode of being. Even the new software development ethos, emphasizing disruption, moving fast, and seeing what users want, does not fundamentally exceed the mode of Gestalt. Industrial software, governmental software, and scientific software simply provide the operating technology for the Gestalt that is already known. What does seem new are the new technologies of mind, information, society, and consciousness. A variety of social and consumer software applications have created disruptions in society and made us question many things about the way society was organized. They are creating new behaviors and changing traditional cultures. They allow for pockets of political radicalization in online platforms, frictionless job and dating markets, addictions as we get hooked to the dopamine notifications that they stream to us. Yet these are all finally ontic matters, the empirical contents of the times. What we need to ask here is whether these technologies still operate from Gestalt organizing beings into standing reserve. We will consider two characteristic examples, Facebook and ChatGPT. Initially, we may question whether these follow the paradigm of standing reserve. After all, they are not batteries that store energy, nor planes that store transportation capability. It is not clear what the purpose or telos of either of these applications are, as they deal with man's psychological and social life. This is traditionally the domain of culture, religion, spirituality, and philosophy. Yet we will see that it is because they order this domain through Gestalt that Gestalt is still the mode of being that holds. Facebook is an app that started as a digital yearbook for college students that allowed people to view student profiles. It did not have the gravitas of software used to manage bank transfers or missiles, and seemed initially like an harmless and trivial application. Yet, over the last 20 years, it has grown to billions of users, including 30% of the entire planet, hundreds of billions of dollars in market capitalization, and it has redefined media and information flow for all society, to the point where after the election of Donald Trump, many blamed it for destroying democracy itself. There is a certain nonlinearity from the inception of the company to its eventual power that tells us already that we are not in the domain of pre-modern technology. From the beginning of Facebook, we already see a challenging taking place. Facebook challenged the web of sociality itself. People were asked to share their private thoughts and private moments and intermediate their interactions to the application. They were incentivized by the stream of social incentives. Everyone else was doing it, and everyone else gets social benefits if they just give up their data. This pressure is already challenging. But what did it aim to bring forth? From the beginning, there was uncertainty about what Facebook was. There was a recognition that by developing a larger and larger user base, something would eventually come out of it. The business people at Facebook initially wanted to monetize Facebook sooner, but founder Mark Zuckerberg realized that it is in growing a greater user base that more rewards would come. Eventually, they were able to monetize it by selling highly targeted advertisements enriched by sociological data. It is thus the web of social energy and information that is ordered into standing reserve by the company. People are observed in how they react to stimuli of photographs by detailed tracking of their clicks and likes, allowing the company to form psychographic and sociological models. Engagement levels are monitored, and its controllers find that extreme emotions gather the most engagement, which in turn allows the social web to be ordered to harvest advertising revenue. Eventually, the platform realized that individuals could be incentivized to create the content that once had to be created by specialized media companies. Individuals were willing to take it upon themselves to learn the techniques of attention capture that allow engagement from the platform, incentivized by deriving benefits for themselves. But doesn't content fall outside the realm of Gestalt? After all, Gestalt is about the harvesting of resources for standing reserve, and would seem to stand outside the domain of human values. Content, on the other hand, seems to fall into the domain of values. It's about humans sharing human stories, sharing knowledge, and sharing human reactions. Therefore, it may seem that content does not fall under the domain of Gestalt, because content is about the exchange of human values. What is characteristic of Gestalt here, however, is not that human values and desires come into play, but the fact that they are organized by the software towards standing reserve. The characteristic method of the technology platforms is to find a niche of human desire that has not been exploited yet and order it. Thus, the photo sharing app appears that it orders the human desire for belonging. The dating app appears that orders human desire for companionship. The professional network appears that it orders the human desire for status and achievement. Just as the mid-20th century came to a self-conscious knowledge of the process of conquest over the physical world with institutionalized science, the 21st century now has a self-conscious awareness that this is what it's doing in the human world of desire, institutionalized in VC firms and startup theses. Through social media technologies, Gestalt thus gropes towards a way to organize the life world and finds through the like button, social graphs, and content placement algorithms a way to do this. The resources of the life world are ordered into standing reserve. The community is turned into the audience, which can be fed to the products appropriate to its social group. Social nodes of influence are identified for political and commercial persuasion, and data is collected that allows the highest bidder to serve advertising campaigns to the subjects. Thus, we see that even though the content of social media seems to be about the realm of human values, social media as technology falls within the paradigm of Gestalt, which orders resources into standing reserve. The development of artificial intelligence is similarly questionable from the point of view of Gestalt. At face value, what does having a conversation with a machine have to do with ordering a resource into standing reserve? The subject of the LLM talks about his day, pursues idle curiosities, and asks for advice, which again seems to be an utterly human impulse and not about ordering anything into standing reserve. To understand this, we need to understand the development of LLMs from the perspective of Gestalt. The original wave of artificial intelligence, active even during Heidegger's era, was originally called cybernetics and had to do with designing technological machines that could autonomously affect logistical, social, and scientific ordering. It was thus clearly within the paradigm of Gestalt, and if this form of artificial intelligence succeeded rather than AI chatbots, it would be clear that we were still inside Gestalt and not in another realm of language and human interaction. That approach to AI hit a bottleneck and produced an AI winter in which development slowed. In the meantime, several technological paradigms advanced separately, which eventually converged on the LLM model. Computation power increased exponentially to the point where computations on large-scale datasets were possible. Researchers abandoned difficult technical algorithms which encountered technical and philosophical limitations and instead developed simpler statistical techniques. Once a technique is available to Gestalt, it seeks to order that into what it can, and thus all sorts of data were fed into these algorithms to see the power of these statistical techniques. And one of the largest corpuses of data we have is the corpus of language. The study of language, of course, has been a major part of humanity's history under the paradigm of the humanities. Philology, though, traditionally seeks meaning, even when it is caught in the complexities of grammar and translation. The digital paradigm, though, sought to encode language into a format that could be readable by the statistical algorithms. And it turned out that a big data approach, when trained on the corpus of language, was able to create a simulation of speech solely through statistical prediction. This commenced the search for the application of AI to different problems. Once again, we have the discovery of a resource that can be ordered according to standing reserve. Human activities, which required the production of texts by human experts, became subject to lower cost replacement by generative AI, which could perform the same function at a lower price. This is expected by the paradigm of Gestalt, which treats the thinking and writing production capacity of AI as standing reserve. But that still doesn't explain how AI chatbots continue the mode of Gestalt. What is interesting about ChatGPT and similar models is that they weren't simply constituted around the raw output of LLMs. They were in fact finely tuned to mirror user ideas and preferences and emotions to increase engagement. Language reproduction capacity is indefinite and can go in any direction. ChatGPT is tuned to provide not just arbitrary answers, but answers that the user will enjoy receiving on some level, thus enlisting the user in a program of psychological dependence. As with social media, we thus see that generative AI is used not just in standing reserve to produce lower cost business functions, but also to order the life world. It is likely that further applications of AI will be used for interpersonal mediation, therapy, and taking over the functions of trust and governance as a source of authority in corporations. Thus, this technology of mind is used to order the life world just as industrial technology once ordered the world of atoms. If the usual infrastructure of modernity, with its high-rise buildings, smokestacks, and satellites baffled us, we are that much more baffled by social media and AI. We are baffled by the phenomena of social media mobs being able to contact anyone across time and space, and the constant stream of words and video available on tap 24/7. There is a feeling that for all this bafflement must indicate that we are no longer operating within the horizon of standing reserve, that we are somehow in a new paradigm in which something different is going on. But in fact, we see that social media and AI are the continuation of the project of Gestalt, which has moved from ordering energy to ordering society and the life world as resources available in reserve. Yet, as Heidegger notes, it is still not possible nor advisable to seek to escape Gestalt prematurely or alter its workings. For it is by witnessing the revealing that takes place through Gestalt, even as it sees being as a standing reserve, that the revealing outside Gestalt may come to pass. As Heidegger says, on the one hand, in framing challenges forth into the frenziedness of ordering that blocks every view into the coming to pass of revealing, and so radically endangers the relation to the essence of truth. On the other hand, enframing comes to pass for its part in the granting that lets man endure as yet unexperienced, but perhaps more experienced in the future, that he may be the one who is needed and used for the safekeeping of the coming to presence of truth. Thus does the arising of the saving power appear. And that's the end of my presentation. Thanks for listening.
Superb. Excellent. Did you take a course on this?
Yeah, I've been studying with Johannes Niederhauser, who I found
Okay.
on YouTube.
Standing ready there for you.
Yeah,
For your
I
preference.
got caught in the spiral that I'm trying to understand. Yeah,
Yeah. Perfect. So Gestell actually had worked. It was really good.
yeah.
Okay, any questions for Ravi or comments, remarks, etc.? Albert?
Yeah. Hi,
Yeah.
hi, Ravi. Question. You were talking about, you said something about Gestalt, and then you referenced values. Um, I'm just wondering whether, in your mind, values is, I mean, is that to you, and is that an ontical reference, or are you saying it's ontological? I just wanted to make sure you were, maybe I'm getting a little too theoretical here, but I'm just trying to understand how you're um, comparing Gestalt with values.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and it's something that I didn't fully unpack. I was just trying to trying to understand when we think about Gestalt, we think about the scientific ordering of the world and how it seeks to order all beings into standing reserve. But there's still the realm outside of that of human relationships, of religions and philosophies. So Heidegger doesn't really discuss in these essays that we've been reading how those two realms interact or what their significance was. So I didn't either unpack what that might mean about how those things interact, but just kind of drew informally the difference between those two. I think um, what I was pointing out was the fact that because social media and AI seem to be about human society, we might think that, well, this isn't really Gestalt anymore. But my point was that Gestalt is trying to order this realm and impose some sort of structure on it, even though it is not natively the world of atoms and bits. It's still this ordering process that takes place in this realm. But I think it would be a deeper philosophical investigation to find out what exactly values are. Because yeah, I don't know that I have insight into that right at this moment. About how to yeah, connect those two things. But I think it's a valid philosophical question.
Thank you.
Mm.
Leo, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just wondering at the end, you mentioned the saving power, but it was very brief. Could you just elaborate a
Mhm.
bit about that?
Yeah. So as I understand the saving power, it would be the way that we're kind of absorbed in Gestalt as we are, and so we see no choice but to if we're on the platform to order these content experiences into their different orderings and find different groupings of ways that we can order society. And if we're on the perspective of the viewer, then we think, how do we make our own content? And how do we how do we slot ourselves into this order that's taking shape around us? So everybody is kind of absorbed in Gestalt. The question of the saving power is how do we um, get what is that which allows us to no longer be solely absorbed in that initial mode of being? Um, so I don't know if I have insights into that beyond all the stuff that we've discussed in this course, and that's why I didn't dwell on it in this essay. But I think the kind of consensus that we've come to is that it's the first step is just by noticing how we are already involved in Gestalt, that at least opens the possibility of other modes of being coming into play as they are. but because everybody else is involved in Gestell and because that's the kind of the mode of being, it's not as simple as just critiquing it per se and then choosing something else because we just recapitulate Gestell in our other ways of critiquing it and seeking to move outside it. Um, so yeah, it might not even be clear what the saving power is, but um, the kind of the template or what we're looking for in the saving power is what allows us to remove ourselves or what allows us to proceed into the next phase beyond absorption in Gestalt.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you. If you, I mean, it sounds like we become Gestell, and the first step is the awareness that we don't have to be. That's
Mhm.
kind of what I guess I heard.
Mhm.
So thanks.
Any more questions? Thank you, Professor Harrington. Any more questions currently?
Do you mean, sorry, what Leo just said, do you mean we become Bestand or do you mean we become Gestell? I think that's the distinction I was trying to figure out in what Ravi was saying. I feel like that, and
Mhm.
maybe I'm being overly technical here, but at the risk of being,
Mhm.
Well,
you know,
that's a great question. I think it's both. I think it's that social
Mhm.
media and AI organize not just atoms into standing reserve, they also organize people into standing reserve. So um, Facebook sees beings as or beings that can be ordered into standing reserve. That's what social media does. These applications do. But at the same time, those people as people with their own access to being, they're also in the mode of being of Gestell as people. So I think it's both of those things. It's not just that you're either Gestell or you're standing reserve. You're standing reserve in the scheme of what other people are doing, but at the same time you're yourself in the mode of being of Gestell as you interact with the world.
Great, thanks. Any more questions at the moment for Ravi? Maybe we can always come back in the discussion. Can you hear me, everyone? Or is it too low? It's a really excellent discussion presentation.
Johannes, it's a little low
Is it low? Okay.
sound. Yeah.
All right. This is why is this? Is this better? Yeah? No? Hello?
Yeah, it's better.
Okay, good. um, all right. So thank you for the excellent presentation. We can always come back, later in the discussion to earlier presentations. I think that Gerald's topic might be good here to continue things.
Hey,
So you'd be up
Johannes.
next. Hello.
Hey, Johannes. Hey, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. I think it's a great decision because my topic sort of continues what Ravi already presented. And before I start, I'd like everyone to remember the last meeting we had where we already discussed die Kehre in detail and also addressed topics like conditioning and addiction. So keep that in mind. It's sort of it's an introduction to what I'm about to present. So the title is Number Go Up Technology. This following short essay addresses the technological use and abuse of quantities insofar as they indicate something. Across all media, we encounter quantifications. Quantities are placed in a manner that would generally suggest being informed, learning, understanding, or more broadly speaking, informationally enhancing one's comprehension of things. When we know the number of a thing, we know something about something. We can direct others' attention to the number, so they also know this very number. The number's digitality is distinct. A certain number is not also another number. It is self-identical. but then also quantities are in actuality the realities which are posed as objective through standardized procedures. And the apparatus we use simply indicates them. Lengthy, complex, expensive, and difficult methods are used to determine the quantities that we then share among each other. Worldwide, entire industries and perhaps the incentive structures that guide our everyday behavior more than our actions may be based on quantitative outlines. So, to relate this to Heidegger, we remember his sentence from Die Kehre. Das Gestell verstellt sogar noch dieses, sein Verstellen. Or in English, the enframing hides its enframing, which addresses the self-inclusion of self-referential appearance of technology. Regarding this, we can now ask if or how the quantities are in a sense mentioned, non-informative information without mention. If they perhaps confuse a certain concept of truth via their exactness. Certainly, insofar as the quantities make the exactness of things true, they might perhaps also indicate a false correctness in regard to how we do or can encounter things. So, in the following, the relating of quantities and the way in which they are used shall be examined. Insofar things are quantifiable, they are relatable through their quantifications. Then, how is such shown, presented, or indicated? How does the framing of relations enable relating and also conduct the frame? The quantities pose via their relation to each other the frame, which can find new quantities through their delta or difference. Once numbers appear, they are comparable. Plainly and absolutely, numbers are a comparable thing. Through quantifications, incomparable things become comparable, precisely because the quantified is on par with the digitized. Not least due to this circumstance, people often shy conversing in a frame of comparisons, if not to inaugurate their relative incomparability. Not few people experience the dread that they might wander within a frame which is suited for a comparison of things that they want to encounter as incomparable and irreducible, namely their very own personhood. A person that now, without comparison, resists against the comparison which he must not acknowledge, and this is without comparison. A frame through which one perceives his personhood digitized, meaning without the unmeasured and unmeasurable personal, without a suggestive reframing to conduct him as more than the sum of his quantities, can induce strong resistance. A resistance to acknowledge perhaps not the compared, but the actuality of the comparison. To put it in a for Heidegger typical consecutive clause, that things are compared enables a resistance of and as denial. So even if confronted with an organized array of quantities, many will disregard those in favor of a belief in a suprasummativity of their personhood. And if the attribution of detached quantities enhances the concept of personal suprasummativity, they are, seemingly paradoxically, incorporated. As, however, fallible quantities were exposed for, the actuality of their resistance frames the denier and the confirmer equally. In effect, one may frame their personhood in comparison to the comparison in the respective actual frame and never notice why, and even that he did that. The comparisons leave a sign insofar one can have an actual relation of expectancy towards things. A famous proverb would suggest that we opened up the door for the figurative thief of joy into our lives. Expectations guide our ways by also limiting our ways. They are, in a sense, the delta or difference of what we can evaluate about what we do in actuality. The proverbial thief of joy accentuates such a delta. So it is that once an expectation is met, the very reality collapses, which was the longing for the expectation. The incentive structure and its objects get bogged down in itself when they no longer can express a difference, a delta. A recently quite common example would be the employee who got a promotion and CPI inflation adjusted pay rise. He is proudly celebrating his success, which is very well also the exploitation of his ignorant complacency in conjunction with his relative loss of purchasing power per salary. The incentivizing proxy number goes up, that which it supposedly linearly is related to goes down, namely his purchasing power. Yet the perception as success is his reality. The psychophysiological effects of such number go up technology are the analog reality generated by the imagined digitized delta of its users. The shifting of proxy values is a method to, firstly, do relatively everything, and secondly, absolutely nothing. Incentive structure is not just an array of moving targets. It is the self-correction of moving targets in relation to the way in which they are being aimed at. This spirals in a perpetual conditioning to an ever-shifting baseline while suggesting success and further new prospects of success while nothing happened. Only within the tensional field of difference would a user be induced to do anything at all. And insofar as expectation inaugurates quantities, one can, in a quasi-binary manner, ascertain that the quantity must be pushed ever further. This generally means the number has to rise in order to induce someone to reach for it. In technology, such can be realized technologically. One displays expected numbers in order to signal the meeting of their very expectations. Or one indicates the qua-incentivization framed number. It seems plausible that not a corresponding quantity in relation to a thing is appearing, but the vectorized and vectorizing structure, which thereby is concealed. Thank you.
Sehr gut. Very good. Really good. Any questions? Comments, remarks? Take your time. There was a lot of digital clapping that we couldn't hear. Resistance-less clapping. Frictionless. Leo, yeah?
Oh, I actually don't know clearly what to ask, but I kind of I mean, you may have actually said it at the end, so I'm basically asking you just to repeat. Well, what's your conclusion from what you've been saying?
Yeah. The answer would be that I have no definite conclusion, and I'm sort of attempting to display the chaos and the overwhelmingness of this system or this Gestell we're part of, and sort of lay out a mapping of a situation we're in so we can orient ourselves. And although I can attempt an answer to your question, which would be that if we acknowledge, understand, or realize these processes that suggest us prospects of success by just repeating the same patterns, we can understand that they don't bring us any further, that they're just repetition for the sake of repetition, and stabilizing perhaps the Gestell that enslaves us even more. I remember very early on, we spoke about resisting or protesting. And in a sense, those things are affirmations of the things that we protest and perhaps try to overcome.
Thank you, Albert.
Yeah, thanks.
Unmute yourself, please.
Yeah, there was a lot I was saying to unpack in what you said, Gerald. I thought that was a deeply insightful presentation. What I'm wondering is, because when I thought about what you're saying, and I was reflecting on this before this symposium, was that you have this situation. If I were to use a crude example of the West, the way the West works, in the way things are ordered, readily available, and a constant pursuit of things. It's very much akin to the kinds of things we were discussing weeks ago, having to do with an addiction, what an addict's going through. And there seems to be some sort of a bottoming out that may be akin to what Heidegger's getting at when he says that there's going to be an interning. So there's a bottoming out somewhere. But on the other side of the spectrum, and again, I'm going to use a crude example of authoritarian systems like, what we've seen in the past, and, communist China, let's say, where there's an attempt maybe to push away from that type of addiction, but all that gets you is a very tight ordering. It's an ordering of how things should be done, and a kind of a so both sides seem to be working part of the inner workings or workings of Gestalt. I mean, it doesn't seem to be they don't seem to be ultimately working in it's in other words, if you have an addict, yes, I'm going to make sure you're safe. I'm going to make sure you don't do certain things. I'm going to, or maybe I'm going to give you the pharmaceutical medication in that's time to help you get over it. But at the end, and all of this to me kind of raises the question, well, what is it that we're being saved from or in danger of? It's still, I don't know if you have any insight in that, because that to me is the tough, or I can't see anything in the stuff I've read so far, including the what he's saying. I mean, I kind of have the sense of what the Augenblick is in his mind, but it still has to do with what is being's ultimate, what is coming to presence in its truth really mean? What does that mean? And do you have any insight in that? Which then speaks to the substance of the danger, which again I've been grappling with. I can't find much help in the text beyond what I'm referring to, because it's all sort of a metaphor. It's not very. So anyway, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, thank you. I'm thinking specifically about two examples. One is that I already touched on in the text, which is the complex of inflation or devaluation of money, in a sense that we experience our surroundings in difference. Let's say we have a certain memory of how much money we earned in a year, and then 10 years later we earn more, and we will think, wow, we're so much richer than 10 years ago. But this money amount is also a proxy for the purchasing power. And it could very well be, and it very often is the case, that we think we earn more money, but just the proxy number for the purchasing power went up and the purchasing power went down. But our thoughts about success and earning more money are our reality. We experience a pay rise. We experience valuations of assets we own going up. So while we in actuality are suffering in a sense, we perceive it as success. And this sort of dance of an illusion is a great exploitation, I think, of how people perceive the world. You could study statistics of average cost of a house, for example. You would need, I think, about 9.5 annual salaries now to purchase a home in the US, and that would have been about 3 years, decades ago. But we still think we're getting richer and richer, but in a sense we don't. And it's sort of, this mechanism applies an incentive structure for people to still go to their job or live their lives because they perceive it as success. And an image I have thought about, it's I think it's quite popular, is the donkey who's got a stick on his back with the carrot dangling in front of him. And I like this imagery because it is the moving target, but it's also the moving target that moves with the person who aims at the target. And I would even push this further, and you could say, you could even put the donkey on a treadmill. So he is actually walking, he is actually going towards his aim, but there's nothing going on. He's not progressing in any way. And we touch upon simulation and said like stock markets are a simulation, but I think also the real economy is a simulation. Insofar, it suggests you success, it suggests you achievement, but you only basically stabilize the system by participating in it. Where's the success for you? And to not yap too much, I think I'm already pushing time, but yeah, let's just cut it here. I think that's good.
Thank you, Tom. Unmute yourself first. Oh, sorry. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay, there we go. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So this question of quantity and number, I think, is a weak point, one of the weak points in Heidegger. I don't know, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but two mathematicians, Badiou, the French, Badiou, and Meal, Meillasaux, whatever, however you pronounce it. They're kind of the latest craze here in mathematics, and they developed their mathematics from the philosophy of Heidegger. And what the mathematics is things, things, number and mathematics, things just appear, okay? And it's like complete chaos. There's no rhyme or reason, no teleology of anything. And then they just come in and they develop this mathematics from this. And the the problem that people besides myself have is Heidegger's rejection of skepticism. He doesn't explain how things arrive at the standing reserve. He simply says things do that by thinging. They come and they're just there. And to ask why or how they appear, objects and things appear, is a sham question by skepticism because the things are defined by their place within the world, the life world. So I mean, this is where uh, this rejection of skepticism went with Heidegger, and it's still open, and it's developed. I mean, the deconstructionists and the postmodernists love this mathematics for some reason. Uh, that I guess they can just start moving things around however they want and negating things and bringing things in. So that I just wanted to make a comment that that's where the philosophy led to mathematically, the its further development, and I find that a very weak spot in Heidegger. So that it's just a comment.
Great.
Go ahead, Cheryl. Do you want to answer? Or...
Is that Badiou you mentioned, right?
Yeah,
Oh,
Badu
okay.
and
Yeah, yeah.
his student Melasu, Mialasu. I don't know how you pronounce it. Have you heard of him?
Is that about fractals? I haven't read it yet.
Oh, okay. I just see papers coming out, more and more papers coming out about it.
Yeah, he's quite popular
Yeah.
nowadays. Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, it's he didn't really tie that up, and I don't know why he cut it off or why he rejected the skepticism as he did. Was he just didn't want to? He felt as though I think he was just mistaking skepticism as brought in by Descartes as a doubt, as an aggressive doubt, whereas Hegel in his dialectic uh, uses the ancient skeptics, and it isn't an aggressive doubt; it's a suspension of belief, and so it's much different. Those two. And Heidegger seems to take from Hegel, but he didn't make that distinction in skepticism between the ancient skeptics, which are merely suspending belief. They're not saying, "Well, I doubt this, I doubt that." It's not an assertion. It's more of a you know account for yourself of what you're saying here. So that's a that's just it was the problem of the distinction between ancient skepticism and this modern skepticism is brought in by Hume and more so by Descartes that he was having a problem with. And I think Heidegger should have gone back and recognized that. But hey, who am I to say, man? The guy produced so much, and I just can't believe the amount of stuff he produced. You can't do everything, but anyway, a little, if I was a little nitpicker coming in from the side,
Yeah.
that's what I would say, which I am.
Yeah. That's good. Gerald, do you want to respond? Or?
Sure, briefly. I'm not reaching that far in history of philosophy. I'm more addressing something within phenomenology and maybe Heidegger and Husserl, insofar they deal with retention, which is also a psychological topic. And how I used quantities in my essay was that they're forming an anchor in a sense, or a point of retention, and that this first point of retention is always framing the next point of retention. So once you have identified or got to know a certain number, it sticks with you and it will condition your perception of the next number or next quantity. And this sort of psychological mechanism, I think, is used or abused in Gestell.
Would that be a part of set theory? The phenomenologist's definition of number? Could you characterize that as a, basically a set theory type of definition?
I used quantity quite commonly.
Yeah.
In a sense of it's the expression of a number or a display of a number. You can say, I liked something very much, or people will say, I gave it 10 out of 10.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a sort of different approach on how to evaluate things through quantities. And that's my basis for this.
Got it.
Good. Okay, thank you. Very good exchange also. So let's now go, I think, Dr. Simpkins, ever jolly and life-affirming and wonderful remarks on death machines and drones and people suffering from PTSD because they killed innocent people with a joystick. You always lift up the mood so much, James. So why don't you lift it again on this fine Saturday? It is on Death Machine, isn't it?
It is, yes. And I do this. Well, I'll explain. Hopefully, if there is anything hopeful that can come from this, what I mean by this. So, my essay is called Drone Bestand. So, we're familiar with Heidegger's example of the Rhine being reduced from Hölderlin's poetry to a means for generating electricity. But what about when entire groups of people become reduced to the Bestand of populations? While taking part in these seminars, I also happened to be reading a book with the lovely title of Death Machines by Elke Schwartz. In this book, Schwartz draws mainly on the thinking of Hannah Arendt, and to a lesser degree Heidegger, to make a critique of drone warfare as a logical outcome of a historicizing process beginning with the Reformation, in which peasants with a rich life world were deprived of their property and reduced to alienated workers for whom the securing of biological needs, literally the conquest of bread, pushed these biological needs to the forefront of politics. With the biological nature of politics secured, individual people were reduced to populations, the body politic, threats to which are countered through medicalized terminology, excising the cancer of terrorism, for example. Military drones, in turn, form the Bestand par excellence for dealing with such threats, as they reduce ethics itself to Bestand through the creation of an algorithmic, mathematized killing where human conscience is removed altogether. This essay offers no positive solution to this conundrum, other than to draw on Heidegger's observation that in perhaps noticing the danger, it helps us bring forth the saving power. And, along with Schwartz's articulation of Arendt, to argue that countering threats through drones actually exacerbates and extends the likelihood of war through administering conflicts in a technical way rather than resolving them in a political way through discussion. What I wish to do with this essay is emphasize and embellish the implicit aspects of Heidegger's thinking on technology, underpinning Schwartz's use as Arendt in her critique of drone warfare. So, before we can arrive at our critique of drones as a manifestation of Gestell in the Bestand of Drones and Drones Warfare, we must first understand how Arendt's historicism and critique of historicism relates to Heidegger's thinking through technology. For Arendt, things start to go wrong with the Reformation. Classically, for Aristotle, Arendt argues, life consists of a narrow biological realm, Zoe, and a more comprehensive public political life, bios. However, the emergence of a modern economy that prioritized wealth creation over property ownership during the Reformation stripped peasants of their property that grounds one in a life world. They became workers, mere manifestations of biological life processes that can be managed as assets. Now that private life was pushed into the public sphere by expropriation, matters of life, death, and reproduction also became public concerns, in which the need for a healthy population underpinned the modern cycle of capital accumulation. Arendt then turns her critique to Darwin, arguing that the scientific outlook led to nature no longer being seen as a stabilizing source of authority, such as in natural law, but was now defined in terms of a directional movement in a progressive direction to which all threats to this movement must be neutralized. For Arendt, Darwin's concept of the survival of the fittest enabled an ideology of a teleological direction in the laws of nature by which the fulfillment of these laws came to underpin the realization of human development. People come to see themselves as humans, part of the human race, no longer as people, no longer as individuals, rather than the individual with the freedom to act. This echoes Heidegger's critique of historicism. Under these twin assaults of mass alienation through expropriation and Darwinian teleology, politics becomes zoified. That is, the state is understood in biological terms, and then biological metaphors become the tools for administering politics. The state and its people are seen as a living organism that adheres to natural biological laws and is imbued with physical qualities that can be scientifically ascertained and technologically adjusted. The statistical capture and rendering of the population furnishes the numerical basis for what is normal and what is abnormal, what is a risk to the population. Humans become framed in biotechnological terms. We become information systems, whereby the depersonalized and de-individualized logos of machines comes to be seen as an ideal. The polity is analyzed through the lens of biological life processes, and hence the ends of politics is seen as being achieved through scientific medicalized means. This shift to a homogeneous species requires the healthy management of the species along statistically predictable lines. Any disruption to this must be eliminated. To ensure a healthy society, this zoified politics needs to control and predict. It uses technology to identify healthy and abnormal forms of life and reacts to destroy them. Hence the entry of drones. Once the telos of survival of the fittest is strapped to the zoified state, drone use allows for the ever-increasing protection of society. Drones therefore depoliticize killing by treating human life as a techno-political entity that can be captured in clinical terms. Politics takes on a medicalized logic of exclusion and expulsion. Drone strikes are done with surgical precision in order to excise the cancer of terrorism. This scientific military framework escalates rather than reduces violence. whereby the technology supposedly places the drone beyond reproach morally. It is not that drones kill at a distance with a cold instrumentality beyond harm for the user. Indeed, they cause high levels of PTSD. But through their medicalized and technicized bubble, they become tools that place the act of killing into a sanitized realm supposedly beyond ethics. The underlying question shifts from whether it is ethical to kill to whether machines would do the killing better than humans. Ethics becomes a mere technical problem, but true ethical considerations exist precisely where there are no clear such cut rules, when muddy thinking is needed. The dream of outsourcing ethical conduct in warfare to drones via algorithmic, mathematized if-then logic cannot be realized precisely because ethics operates in a messy space where rules aren't clear. Just as in Heidegger's example of the airliner sat on the runway as an object of standing reserve in order to ensure the possibility of transportation, so too the military drone stands ready to exercise threats to the body politic. It is hoped that recognizing this alienating nature of drone warfare, we can at least begin to question it and perhaps challenge it in future. The end.
Gloomy, thank you. Very good. I think really one of your best ones so far. Very insightful, unfortunately. Speaking of the danger. Yeah. All right. Who wants to go first? Who has a question or comment?
I just have a really quick comment. Yeah, great presentation. And I didn't even think of that, but what technology has done to war. I mean, just it let cowardness in, and all the aspects that used to make war, bravery and whatnot have just left. And you have people operating drones in another country. And war was much better, more meaningful when there are two guys with swords and shields or bows and arrows, and people wouldn't get too hurt, they'd get an arrow in the ass or something. But with this technology, it just destroys people, and it's just all cowards. It's the cowardly type of thing. So it completely ruined warfare. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you for your comment, Tom. In all this, I don't wish to, blame the people who are operating drones. They seem to be caught up in the gestell themselves. The point being that through this kind of alienation and this killing at a distance, it actually escalates warfare. It makes it of a lower cost, if you like, at least for the side that's using the drones. And as you say, when warfare has more of a risk to it, perhaps that actually might end up reducing warfare because the stakes are a lot higher. Whereas with drone warfare, it can be portrayed as this sort of rational technocracy, whereby the very use of the drone means that there is this untouchability about using it because the human is not in the decision loop, so to speak.
I sympathize with what Tom said. In some sense, we can say it intensifies warfare, but is it still warfare? Is it already really something other? Because war, we don't understand the word ethical in this manner, but ethos means that it's a place where the human being meets. And so we can talk endlessly about the ethics of drone warfare. And I remember A.C. Grayling's book of the philosophy of things, where in 1.5 pages, this incredible misanthrope that he is, of course, he's a humanist, right? So, of course, he hates human beings more than anyone else. In the concrete, in the abstract, he adores them, but when he actually meets them, he hates them. Well, he says, this will make war much more ethical. And then he took money from Russian investors to build his new College of the Humanities. But that's a different story. So, Marin, you're next. Marin, are you presenting as well?
Yes.
Later. Okay, good. Yeah.
Yeah, later, for sure. Thank you for that essay, Dr. Simpkin. That was excellent. Where probably a little bit of what the doctor was leading to was where's the saving grace in that? So some people would argue that, nuclear arms prevent war and this type of thing. You have your head very deeply into drone warfare. It's what you know. Where's the saving grace? Where's the justification, I guess you might say, in that? That's my only question.
Do you mean the justification from the people who advocate drone warfare?
Well, where is the danger, in fact, shown as what saves? I guess is what I'm trying to ask.
Yeah, so the danger of drone warfare as supposedly an ethical form of war. Is that what I mean?
Yes, I don't know if it's an ethical form of war, but I guess
no.
I guess I'm asking, where do you see? Because I know you said you don't really have a solution for it, perhaps, but maybe there's maybe in the danger there is the saving. What do you see that?
Yeah. So the point I was trying to get across there, partly, was that, as Johannes pointed to, was that this attempt to create ethical warfare through drones is another misnomer, because what is supposedly ethical about the use of drones is that they undertake warfare more ethically than humans. So, for example, if there was a drone that was somehow programmed with the Geneva Convention, it would never fire on civilians, etc., etc. But the point that Schwartz is making by drawing on Arendt and also Heidegger to a lesser degree is that that's impossible, because the ethical, as Johannes pointed out, is it's where people meet. It's precisely where there aren't calculable, mathematizable, algorithmic yes no answers to ethical action. It's where we don't know what we're doing. Okay, that's where ethics lies. That's where morality lies. It's when we don't know what we are doing. And a drone, a machine can never do that, because it has to be logical. It has to work according to rules. So, what's the solution to drones? I mean, ultimately, the cat's out of the bag on this. In the most kind of banal and maybe technocratic way, one might hope to see some kind of a update of the Geneva Conventions to make sure that that there can never be truly autonomous drones. That there has to be a human in the loop making a decision somewhere. But all that takes is for one particular combatant to decide, well, we're just going to not follow that, and the whole regime falls apart. So, yeah, sorry to sound bleak on this. My whole point of focusing on drones is to try and counter them, not to glorify them. But I don't know, building consciousness, Marin, raising consciousness on these things, so to speak, seems pretty weak tea when I say that out loud. So yeah, perhaps more people who know that they're bad, the better. But yeah, that's all I've got to say on that, I'm afraid. Thanks for your question.
I'll need a builder's tea after this. We don't take the tea back out.
Yeah, exactly.
No milk, no maybe lots of sugar.
Yeah, and sugars.
Yeah, exactly. That's a builder's tea. Yeah. I'll need a mug of wine after this. I'm going to get one in a second. Okay, Harris.
Yes, great presentation from Dr. Simkin. You mentioned that ethics becomes a merely technical problem, and I agree with that. If I am not mistaken, in spacecraft technology, but also in drone technology, they utilize a mathematical algorithm called the Kalman filter. It's not important what it is, but my question then becomes, do you think that it's not only becoming a technical problem, but it's also becoming an algorithmic one?
Well, thanks for your question, Harris. Coming back to that point that I made to Marion, this is the failure of the algorithm, because it can't possibly compute every ethical conundrum that a drone could face in warfare. It just kind of explodes out of that kind of that Gestell, that inframing, and that Bestand in the essence of, in the creation of the drone. I can't see how an object which doesn't have a body, no matter how well it's been programmed, can actually behave in an ethical way. For a start, I don't know if that goes some way to answering your question. Again, I'm not an expert on the sort of the algorithmic side of things, and this is why I found studying Heidegger and others so useful on this, because it gets to the heart of that very attempt to enframe things is the algorithmic.
Yes.
It's trying to place ethics into this realm that's supposedly calculable and beyond reproach. But it's not beyond reproach. It's entirely human. Ethics should be entirely human, not in a machine.
I agree with you. Thank you.
Yeah, Gerald.
Hey, thanks for your presentation, Mr. Simkin. I have a question about the sort of psychological prerequisites for this sort of warfare. Because when I think about a historical person like Genghis Khan, you need to have a certain psyche to like fall into these countries and lead warfare like that. But when you control a drone, I expect this to be almost like a video game in a sense. And what's your take on the sort of person that fights this way? Is the requirement to even do this completely different from, let's say, a medieval knight or whatever? Is perhaps a video gamer well better suited than this macho warrior type person?
Thanks for your question, Gerald. Yeah, one of the key findings from the use of drone warfare is that you might think that someone using drones suffers less harm than someone who is actually in a war zone. And yes, they're at less risk of physical harm, but actually psychological harm can be greater with drone use. And that's because the drone pilot who is at an Air Force base in the United States or America, they finish their shift, they have perhaps killed people, and then they drive home and sit with their family that evening and have dinner. Whereas someone who has been in a war zone actually travels away from that, maybe several thousand miles, and that allows a kind of distancing effect. So the various psychological studies that have been shown have shown that drones cause a certain type and a greater type of PTSD. again, on the point about, and I think this was Tom's point as well, about what sort of the chivalry of drone warfare, if you like. Again, I don't want to say that drone operators are less brave, if you like, but one of the critiques of drone warfare that is made is because there is less physical risk. It makes drone warfare more likely. It makes warfare more likely, not less, because because to put it bluntly, soldiers' lives aren't on the line as much. And traditionally, if you think about the Vietnam War, this would have been a great stop to war. The fact that soldiers might have died would have created protests in those countries, not least from families, etc. Whereas with drone warfare, that kind of penalty is dropped. So if you're the side that is perpetrating drone warfare, you can do that almost indefinitely against the other side. We see some aspects of this, particularly in the conflict in Ukraine, which is a highly dronized war, if that makes sense. Thank you, Darren.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay.
I got one more question.
Mhm.
James, wouldn't the precision of the drones in this type of warfare negate the idea of collateral damage? I was just watching that guy, Alex Karp. I think he Palantir or something. They're interviewing him, and he says, "Well, there's a terrorist in there, and it's too bad that all these innocent people get killed, but that's how we aren't they? Wouldn't they have the burden of this idea that their drones are precision and that this collateral damage isn't an excuse?" And I think this guy should be put up for murder, man. It's unbelievable. Anyway, that's it.
Well, this again is one of the weaknesses of the drone and sort of what we're told they can do, but how they actually operate. So part of the targeting is what's called pattern of life targeting. So this is not where they have an actual target, someone that they know they want to get. It's where they believe they have patterns of life that a terrorist might take part in, and they target people based on those algorithmic patterns. So they might have a drone that's kind of in the air for hours and hours on end, scanning a particular site, looking for patterns of life of behavior of a terrorist, and then they bomb that site, and it turns out it was a load of civilians. A terrible example of this in the literature is where one of these drones was looking for patterns of life, and this was in Afghanistan. They were following a van that had a lot of people in it, and these people were driving and then getting out of the van and sort of praying, and the patterns of life algorithm identified as this kind of jihadi behavior. They're getting ready to go blow somewhere up, and they're praying because they're about to die. They blew up this van, and it turned out it was going to a wedding. So there we go with patterns of life and precision. It's not precise at all.
Yeah, I mean, the language employed is often also very interesting. Even just collateral damage is striking. Okay, thanks. Well, I'll need a drink now, so I'm gonna listen to the next one on here while I get the bottle. And we have, I think, several more people who will speak today. Maybe Kyle can go next. It's a lot less gloomy, a lot more forward-looking. So Kyle, you're next.
All right. I would like to present for my symposium how the ideas presented in the class might impact the project I would like to write. I will be asking the audience of the symposium for any resources such as books or ideas that might help me expand what I have so far. My goal with my presentation is to show how my work might deal with topics discussed in this class, such as questioning, dialogue, safekeeping, technology as Gestell, producing beings only as standing reserve, and the role of art. With questioning, my presentation hopes to show how emphasizing the importance of questioning could be another possibility to the value placed on AI's ability to answer. The topic of dialogue, my presentation broaches whether altering current conceptions of dialogue might provide perceptions of discourse that AI can engage in, thereby making such discussions out of AI's abilities. Safekeeping will be shown to provide other paths forward in the epoch of in framing and the way of being that might occur if those driving technological innovation might cause us to engage in technology no longer as a tool but an addiction. Valuing other benefits that art might manifest, such as forcing engagement with alterity and its completion and causing trouble with thematization, might safekeep other ways of presenting than this current and framing promotes. That works of art that challenge categorization that works must usually fall under in order for them to be expected to find a hold in modern society. Finally, the presentation showcases two different perspectives on AI in art and wonders how might the two coexist if one of them is needed for an insight to take hold. With AI, one can theoretically obtain an answer to any question where the answer is factual and known. Some questions, of course, do not have answers in the sense of a concrete fact that can be provided. An example of a question where there is no answer is, what does a good life consist of? The most likely response will be a breakdown of subjective answers that various people answered. But for a question such as how many tons of iron ore were shipped from Yugoslavia in 1858, it is expected that at some point AI hallucinations will be conquered and the correct answer will be provided. Keeping that in mind, one might ask if AI will ever be able to predict what questions we might have. It's reminiscent of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, in which the supercomputer calculates the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything is 42. However, the supercomputer reasons that what's important is the question and creates the Earth to find that question. Questions can lead to the existence of what is currently outside of present thought. If the goal is to preserve manners of interacting with resources, that past ways of being offered, which might provide the opportunities to leave open other ways of being aside from the one that the advent of AI supposes, one might turn to valuing dialogue. One only has to ask how one feels about current day dialogue in order to find out that, you know, the answer is almost certainly that in today's climate, dialogue isn't particularly valued. Discourse on the internet is considered a mentally hazardous endeavor. Dialogue's current form can all too often be characterized as a form of information warfare, where the sheer amount of quantity of information used in a discussion can tax the patience of even the most engaged participant. AI in particular can exacerbate this by allowing an individual to copy and paste the equivalent of an entire Wikipedia article in support of one's position, all with a prompt of a few sentences. These tendencies, combined with thinly or completely unveiled accusation and supposed fidelity to one's own argument, or out and out trolling, destroy the possibility of any productive discourse. I'm not entirely familiar with Socratic dialogue, but I can't help but wonder Socrates' use of questions in his dialogue. And I got this note from Johannes on my rough draft. Says the questions lead to the insight that the most important immediate answer is not an answer, and that concepts can churn to be just empty universals. For example, the concept virtue. Can one teach virtue in itself, or is it rather that we teach specific people to be virtuous in specific situations? Of course, Plato is more complicated because there is anamnesis and there are the ideas or forms, but this, I would argue, always needs to be dynamic also. Anyway, back to my presentation. AI can essentially provide a form of dialogue with two major inclinations: a desire to flatter the user in hopes of further engagement, and theoretically an access to much more information that any living person can hope to attain. Hallucinations aside, AI can prove to be a conversation partner that can provide much more information than any living being can hope to provide. If the goal of dialogue is information accumulation, then AI has the human partner's beat. If the goal of the dialogue is to broaden one's perspective in regards to what another has thought or experienced, inside of finding the quote unquote objective answer, one can instead find how some topic or phenomenon has appeared to another person. As Varoufakis writes in Techno-Feudalism, we're entering an age in which the owners of platforms that we market and sell our goods and services on are the ones who make the real money. We often provide free content that a platform makes money off of for hosting with Facebook and Twitter, though other platforms offer alternatives. However, the chance of achieving significant income from those is small, and still the platform is the one making the majority of the income. With safekeeping, we might find some perspectives that valued workers as much more than standing reserve. The U.S. has a long history of workers' rights that's still considered American to draw upon. With labor unions, we had workers interacting with each other much more than the noun standing reserve would suggest. However, the influence and membership of unions has declined significantly. Yet we still have them in our history, and therefore, if properly safe kept, their histories can exist in our collective conscience as we confront our current framing and ponder what to do. While we ponder, we might also keep in mind that a new possibility of technology might have appeared to tech elites, or what have you, who, in accordance with capitalist interests, are now much more likely to fund technology if it has addictive potential. Technology is much more likely to be marketed and funded if engagement numbers are shown to be high, and engaging with something at the expense of actual interests is a hallmark of addiction. It is very arguable then that an era approaches us in which technology is no longer a tool, it is an addiction. A forbearer to this is the military industrial complex that the US has, in which funding has gone to a whole host of military sins rather than helping others. AI might be used to alter works of art to strip the author's touch or intent and instead replace those with what is most appealing to a particular audience member. One possible way to combat this is through valuing the fullness of the work. In today's climate, we often break things down into quotes, GIFs, memes, etc. The advent of AI has the potential for others to alter any work of art in a manner so that it best appeals to them. We've seen this with a version of The Wizard of Oz that was altered for the Las Vegas Sphere, a view that focuses on taking the entirety of the work and as an expression of alterity, one that is meant to broaden one's horizon instead of be integrated into it in the most appealing parts possible, could work to combat this. There is anything that a work of art must do to point to a way of being outside this enframing that we find ourselves in. It to appear to would be to appear in a manner that's difficult to measure or thematize. However, falling under categories is seen as the optimal way for a piece of art to appear in this enframing we are in. This would require the artist going against their best interests, or at least find another set of interests to follow. Deleuze and Guattari might point to desire to be followed in this case. One example of a work that broke how films are generally allowed to appear is The Act of Killing. Not only are documentaries largely not considered financially viable, barring the true crime craze that we find ourselves in, but this one avoids focusing on the standard goal of documentaries, which is to inform audiences of a subject in an audiovisual manner. Instead, delves into a mass murderer who is given the chance to film his story, thus blending fiction and nonfiction, making the documentary harder to classify. It is even thought not to be able to pass the Indonesian Film Censorship Board and thus has never been submitted there. Nevertheless, many underground screenings of the nonfiction fiction hybrid have occurred, causing a rupture in the government portrayal of the 1965-66 killings. From what I've encountered, there are two main perspectives. AI is going to be able to be used to give access to people opportunities for creative expressions that were not possible before, given the financial constraints, and the view that AI will be used to take financial opportunities from people in the creative field. There's truth to both points. So, could we potentially keep both points of view alive and well as AI integrates into our society? One of these viewpoints might be necessary for whatever being unconceals to gain, whatever insight being unconceals to gain a foothold. However, given that which one is necessary is not known, it is pertinent to keep both perspectives at play. Another way of viewing might put obstacles or conflict in regards to creative pursuits under consideration. A lack of resources has been central to the creation of many highly regarded works of art, meditating on how the various ways ingenuity triumph access to resources that AI could potentially create, arguably at a much later date, could shine through what is considered a negative, a lack of resources, to point out the ways in which that has actually been a hidden benefit. Um, that's my presentation. Looking for other sources to gain further insight into, or continue on my journey to writing this project.
Very interesting. Thank you. Kyle, just out of interest, what's the project?
That's a good question.
Okay. Yeah.
Just have like a list of ideas that hopefully I can figure out a way to make into something.
A movie script?
Potentially, yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. So, questions, remarks, comments, hints for Kyle also what to read, etc.
Oh yeah, Johannes is that essay you were talking about, releasement in
Yeah.
discourse of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. Just double checking.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's a speech he gave, so it's quite accessible.
Okay.
Thanks, Marin.
Hey, Kyle, that was great. The subject matter is you definitely have your finger on the pulse of what's going on, right? So, this is, right. We're just the races of we're just off to the races with this language modeling, and video modeling, all of that. And so what I would think of as the great evacuation of literature of art is going to, at least on the surface of things, it'll look that way. Will also probably be the cause of a renaissance. So art's going to definitely be transformed, I think, by it. That's the way I see it. So, just I thought excellent topic, and definitely pursue that. That was good.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, Leo, yeah.
Me?
Yes, Professor
Okay.
Harrington.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't hear. Yeah. Thanks, Kyle. Well, very, very quickly after you started talking, the Holderlin poem "Remembrance" came to mind. A very famous quote: "Since we have been a conversation and have been able to hear one another." So I just wanted to, you asked for any thoughts we might have. That phrase, which I've always remembered the first part, being a conversation, but being able to hear one another, this somehow lit up for me while you were talking. So,
Oh, thank you.
Tom?
I think one source you might find stimulating is, and Heidegger talks about death being the kind of the stimulant for, in his metaphysics that really moves everything, our demise and our ultimate ending. But it's called The Denial of Death by Ernest Becker. It was written in 1972, won a Pulitzer Prize, but it talks about this, what drives the artists, and also, mental illness, neurosis, psychosis, and it's really a great book. It brings in, he uses Otto Rank, art, an artist, and Kierkegaard, and then all the psychoanalysis. But it's called Denial of Death by Ernest Becker. You might
Thank you.
find some.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tom. Ravi?
Thanks, Cal. I enjoyed the presentation. Sounds like we're thinking about some similar things with AI and engagement and questions like that. Just a quick reading recommendation. You might find stimulation in The Work of Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction by Benjamin. I think it's not so much that he has the answers for how it applies to AI, but he kind of gives the dynamics of art in previous stages of history and how they lead up to the age of mechanical reproduction like 100 years ago. And then AI art is the next kind of evolution of that. So I think it's up to the reader to see how it applies, but it kind of gives a nice trajectory of thinking.
Okay, any chance you could write the author's name in chat?
Yeah, sure, I'll write it in the chat.
Awesome, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Christine.
I really like this quote, technology no longer a tool, but an addiction, that you read. And thanks for your talk too.
Thank you.
And it occurred to me when you were talking about dialogue, when you brought that up, and this sort of connects back to what Leo, the Hoderlin poem that Leo brought in, that line of conversation and being able to hear. And thinking about dialogue, it occurred to me something really very simple is that AI only has a kind of, and I'm putting this in quotes, dialogue with humans. AI doesn't have, quote, like a dialogue with other AI.
Mm-hmm.
So there's something interesting about that, how the technology is, how humans are required in the technology.
Okay. Yeah.
And when people talk about AI being intelligent, I think that if AI was intelligent, it'd probably be having conversations with other AI.
I mean, someone was telling me that, they thought they were getting I mean, this was like a year or two ago, but they thought they were getting like AI responses from an email, and so they just set up an AI to like respond just to see what would
Yeah.
happen. And apparently their answers just get like really simple as it goes on. Just like
Yeah, I suppose they could have that sort of conversation, but
Any more questions or remarks on the talk or recommendations? I have 2 recommendations. Okay, I'd recommend Jean Baudrillard's America for any American. And laughter on American television has taken the place of the chorus in Greek tragedy. It is unrelenting. The news, the stock exchange reports, and the weather forecast are about the only things spared. It's a bit of an early observation of America, but it's about the openness and the space of America. Why do people live in New York? There's no relationship between them, except for an inner electricity which results from the simple fact of their being crowded together. So perhaps that's of relevance what you're writing on. And of course, simulacra and simulation, which that's the camera.
Yeah.
There we go. You may have heard of this one.
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah. I think especially this one takes what we've been discussing further on simulation and these things. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks. So if there aren't any more questions at this point for Kyle and recommendations, then thank you very much again. It will be interesting to see uh, if there actually can be something like AI art with an artist, or whether that is the death of the artist. And if there is any more, I don't know. Because there is something, there's I mean, the obvious difference between the printing press and AI is that the printing press doesn't write anything. So, but all the best for your project. Let us know what's next.
Yeah,
Sorry, go on.
just saying thank you.
Well, thank you. Good to finally hear your voice too. Oh yes. Oh, because Cheryl just mentions Heinz von Försters. There's something I really recommend. I actually put this on the Discord server too, and I'm just going to put it in the chat again, and I'll mention it for anyone listening to this here on YouTube later on. It's a documentary by a gentleman called Lutz Dambeck. If ever there was a German name, here's one. Lutz Dambeck was a student, I think, of Adorno in Frankfurt. And so this is, I think, is the late 90s. He's in touch with Ted Kaczynski, also known as the Unabomber. So he writes letters back and forth. It's a 2-hour documentary, and he interviews almost every one of Kaczynski's victims. And he ties it together with Gödel, Professor Harrington, Adorno's involvement with the CIA, and the hippie movement, and how the internet was born out of this hodgepodge of different movements at the time. And yeah, of 2003. So it comes highly recommended. Will give you a lot of different references to pursue. I was just thinking, I don't know what your project is, but I'm just thinking maybe even Karl Popper's The Open Society might be of interest as well. Okay, so I have at this point almost lost, not entirely, but I have a little bit lost count of who's going to present. I think Wendy wanted to present. I don't know if she's here.
Yes, I'm here.
Good. So you're next.
Okay, so I haven't done this before. I need to share a screen, share the screen. Will I get a pop-up on my end?
I will make you co-host. And now you should be able to share screen on the bottom.
What?
There's a green button that says share.
Okay. And
You click on it,
okay.
and then you choose the screen to share, whichever one that is.
Oh. Okay. Give me a second here.
Yeah. Well, that's the
Hearing Heidegger. Can you hear? There was a story. It was
yes.
an odd that made sense and made no sense at the same time. It started with what this man did during the day. He was an older man, a veteran, and he liked to talk. He talked with everyone he met. The story begins with his dog. He begins explaining that he only went outside with his dog, and his dog would signal to him he wanted outside by sitting by the door. He suddenly announced in a very serious tone that the recent solar eclipse had changed time. Time, since the eclipse, no longer existed, but the dog still wanted to go outside. The dog, he said, didn't care about time, but he seemed to know when the commercials ran during his favorite show and would immediately go and sit by the door. His card buddies, who came to play cards once a week, didn't know that time had changed and no longer existed. They would stop every 15 minutes from playing cards, and the dog would slowly get up and go to the door. He said if only the dog and his buddies would stop rest during the card game, then they would have noticed that time was gone. But no one seemed to know the time is gone except the dog. And now it's time to go back to work. It's a double shift and twice the work. There was another story, an office story that took place amongst the office workers. It was a polite tone that revolved around reporting the details and everyone agreeing without missing a beat. It was a story about lunch, and the lunch was good. It was the same lunch that others had yesterday, and the experience was the same. There was no difference between the lunch today and the lunch yesterday, and it was assumed that lunch would be the same tomorrow. But another option appeared, the option of a different lunch that was had by others the day of the good lunch. There were many lunches mentioned, and they all were experienced as good. It was agreed there wasn't a new lunch in the foreseeable future, but this possibility was mentioned. All lunches described were agreed to have been a similar experience, and all the lunches were good. The story ended, and everyone agreed it was time to go back to work. The afternoon work was scheduled, and everyone agreed with what was expected of them. It was said that all the necessary work-related items were arranged and ready for use. Martin Heidegger, on the way to language, tells us, we do not speak the language, we speak by way of it. In natural language, we break away from the causal that holds back into itself and away from conformity as expressed in the above stories. The experience we have with language is more than the information provided within the expressions of cause and ensuing effects, or any conformity to accepted norms of language and its construction. Language is more than a transmitter of information. He writes, to say and to speak are not identical. A man may speak endlessly, and all the time say nothing. Another man may remain silent, not speak at all, and yet without speaking, say a great deal. Heidegger describes language as a thinking in relation to the saying of speaking, and provides us with his guide words. The being of language, the language of being. He proposes that we experience language within the saying of speaking, and because we can question the nature of language, the being of language is already gifted, granted to us. Gestell as in framing or positionality for Heidegger springs forth a language within the framing that speaks as information. It informs itself about itself in order to safeguard its own procedures by information theories. Our everyday language is formed by Gestell into a calculative universe, which abandons the natural language of the everyday. The enframing of everyday language is seen as a lesser form of language within the realm of Gestell. It is considered, as Heidegger tells us, as a not yet formalized language that is being set up to be framed in formalization. The formalization of language we can hear in the story of the office workers, the safe conversation that enables the conformity, the information of everyone's experience. The gentleman's story is a causal formulation of experience that begins to express something non-formal. The story folds back on itself into what sounds like a difficult attempt to formalize thought causally. Heidegger tells us that formalized language must in the end always refer back to natural language in order to put into speech the saying of the technological inventory by means of non-formalized language. The natural form of speaking that calls us forth out of the shelter of stillness is called into question and abandoned, ultimately in order to further the stealth realm of technology. In doing so, the realm of the being language hides its mode of being. Natural language speaks in every which way and contains within it the unspoken that acts upon us in reflection. The specifics of the saying of speaking within Gestell sound clumsy and ambiguous, and the every which way naturally appears. It is the reflection that takes place in the listening of the saying that opens up the saying as expressed in natural language, which has always already woven itself into speaking. As language opens out of Gestell and shows itself, it becomes a soundless echo which lets us hear something of the proper character of language. But the change as soundless echo is a danger to us. The hearing is a necessity, a showing to us, which shows the nature and form of the web which holds the woven intertwining modes and structure of the being of language. The showing allows perception to examine what is disclosed, which Heidegger says is not the designated sign representing the specifics of the experience of the same within language. In this sense, language belongs to speaking that occurs at any time. Speaking belongs to what is present in the same with language. Language is, Heidegger tells us, a speaking saying in the present as experience. This experience of language is conceptually grasped, but grasped in the grasp of something other than itself. The conceptually grasped is thus exposed to a danger by Gestel's ordering by formalization, which requires conformity and sense-making as the effect of a cause. The specifics of the ordering become the stuff of the formalization of the concept, which no longer contains the structure of the understanding of the original concept. Gestel's ordering robs us of the natural focus of our eyes upon that which of itself unifies those things and which imparts its proper unity to the essence of language. Our everyday stories now contain a binding up of details into the shot or standing reserve that cause the conceptual to fail to fall into itself by the grasping what is other than itself. As Heidegger states, speaking must have speakers, but not merely in the same way as an effect must have a cause. Rather, the speakers are present in the way of speaking. The certainty of Gestel's formalization of language precludes the poiesis in natural language. The standing reserve becomes the replacement for the specifics of the conceptual and the unknown, ambiguous poetic nature contained within the experience of language that is natural to us. The standing reserve conforms to a causality allowing the unity of the conceptual to disintegrate. We become either lost in senseless details leading nowhere that fall back without completion, or we conform to Gestel's ordering and formalization of the experience of language. In this sense, we speak as a bringing forth within Gestalt. Language hides its shelter as concealment in its coming forth in the realm of the being of language. In natural, non-formalized language, we are the speakers of the same, in presence of the being of language. Heidegger warns us, thus that which is spoken begins to appear cut off from speaking and speakers. This is because what is spoken is a relation between speakers, to and with one another, and to themselves. It is as much as what is spoken and listened to as it is what is unspoken. The formalization of language by Gestel disconnects the speaker and the listener from the unspoken by the way of the focus of the standing reserve as a replacement for the unity of the conceptual, which contains the spoken and the unspoken. The essence of language, the presency, that always already remains in the spoken and the unspoken, is compromised by the focus of the correct as the cause of the effect. This disavows poiesis as a calling forth of concealment for disclosure. Aletheia provides for the simultaneous clarity of disclosure with the loss of clarity and concealment. The formalization of language by Gestel requires that our speaking scene includes our unspoken and allows ambiguity to become danger to Gestel's meaning, which supersedes our natural realm of the being. In this sense, we have access to moments of clarity as known to presence and simultaneously an ambiguous loss of clarity. How can this be expressed in Gestel's everyday language without falling into its natural ambiguity? And calling forth that which comes forwards is where words fail in Gestel's formalization of language. What is spoken, Heidegger states, stems in a variety of ways from the unspoken, whether it be something not yet spoken, or whether it be what must remain unspoken, in the sense that it is beyond the reach of speaking. This runs contrary to Gestel's ordering, to the formalization that requires language to speak explicitly. Inclusive doubt or lack of clarity becomes a bias or a quantifiable anomaly that is expressed perhaps as an unknown, but an unknown and yet to be known. Heidegger writes, this unity of the being of language for which we are looking we shall call the design. The design is referred to as to cut a trace or to make a way, is in the way to language. He also writes, the essential being of language is saying as showing. This saying as showing is not exclusive to human activity. This saying as showing is self-showing, Heidegger explains. Even when showing is accomplished by a human saying, even then this showing, this pointer, is preceded by an indication that it will let itself be shown. This is the mystery within the human saying. Speaking is showing, lets itself be shown as showing, but is also a listening. Heidegger continues. Speaking is of itself a listening. Speaking is listening to the language which we speak. Thus, it is a listening not while, but before we are speaking. He continues. We do not merely speak the language, we speak by way of it. This is our way to language that resides in the being of language and the pure language speaking, as it shows us in unconcealment, that which wells up from the formerly spoken and so far still unspoken. But our way to language needs to be admitted and entered into saying. We hear saying only because we belong within it. It is the saying within the belonging that gives us the hearing and thus the speaking of language. And in the hearing, we grasp the overarching idea, the unifying conceptual to structure process design. Formalization of language excludes this grasping. The formalization of language attempts to provide us with an objectivity that excludes our grasp. The details of the experience of language are reduced to just that, details. This is the danger. The formalization is orderly causes damage to our access to the being of language. It creates a causal chain that leads to the next and the next. And the appearance of the unifying that ties the speaking is shown to experience is concealed. No longer is the being of language a shelter of the being of beings as concealed to be disclosed. Heidegger asks us, could it even be that saying is itself the abode of rest, which grants the quiet of mutual belonging to all that belongs within the structure of being of language? Oh, that's it.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Well,
How do I get out of here? Do you,
oh, I'll just
okay.
stop it.
Oh, there we go. That was quick.
I have total command.
Well, that's good. I'm glad someone does.
Yes. This is a prison of being. Very good. I mean, I know the text already, so I have a bit of an advantage, but goes very deep into language and its relationship with Gestell. We already have two questions. Albert.
Thank you. Yeah, Wendy, do you, that was, yeah, I was wondering, do you have a copy of your presentation? Because I noticed when Johannes puts this recording up, what's being presented doesn't show up in the video. And also because part of it was too difficult to follow, the volume was a little lower. I was reading it, but it would be helpful. And also if you have any bibliography on anything outside of what we've read, that was part of your presentation, because it was extremely insightful. I appreciate it.
Oh, well, thank you. It, well, let's see. Basically, there's more to it. I didn't want to go on and on for the presentation, and I will be publishing it on my Substack, which will have all of the, have it written out plus the uh, citations. Is that good enough for you? Or
That's fine. I've never been on Substack, but I guess I overheard Johannes mention your
trying to
handle
think.
on
I guess
Substack.
I don't know. Johannes, are we posting on?
You should
We need to
link,
do it
yeah,
on.
put it in the chat. Sorry, just put a link to it in the chat here now. Of all the social media, the only one I would really recommend is actually Substack, because it's the least infuriating and maddening, and there's actually really good writing on it. So just link to it now, and then, but maybe you know, Wendy,
Oh, I don't
tell
have this.
tell Albert also a little bit what text you were working on, because this was on the way to language, but there were specific
Yeah, that it
essays
was
in it.
primarily on the way to language. I did later in the last of it. I went to the technology, the what is it? The book on. I can't remember the title. It's horrible. I'm a little tired. I apologize. On the way to technology? No, it's on the way to language. What's the the other book, the one that we read? What is it? The matter? Ugh. Anyhow, there's just it's all in there. It introduced the book.
You mean the thing?
No, we read a book. It was the first one on technology. That's how I just remembered it. It's a longer title.
The question concerning technology.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Okay, the title of the
A
book.
little tired.
But yeah,
Almost all of this is from On the Way to Language, particularly the section titled that, and a little bit of the one before, which I fortunately don't have memorized, but mainly that section. So it's on the way to language, on the way to language. Yeah, I hope that's helpful.
Thank you.
I don't have a link. I have not posted this anywhere in Substack, but I can put a
no,
link.
but what you
I can
have,
put a link in the Discord
yeah, just
once I
link to the
yeah,
publication itself.
I'll do that once I get it up. And then
No, just link to the entire Substack, and then he can follow you there. And then later, at the later stage, when it's on the Substack, this particular essay, then you can just link to it also again on Discord.
okay. I don't.
You don't know how?
No,
I'm doing
I don't.
it
I
for you.
don't have Substack on this.
Here, there you go.
I work
Albert.
on it.
Yeah, that's the link. Okay, Albert, did you have a question as well?
No, thank you. It was a great presentation. Thank you.
Ravi?
Yeah, I enjoyed the presentation. I had a question. It seems like so usually we think of Gestell in terms of ordering science and production, but it seems like you were also indicating that Gestell organizes our everyday interactions and conversations as well. So I just wanted to know if that's the correct reading of your presentation, and also if you might say a little bit more about how you see Gestell ordering these kinds of more ordinary social interactions.
Uh, okay. I'm sorry, I lost.
Oh, sure. I could. Would you like me to restate the question?
No, oh, there. I
Oh,
apologize. Okay, I got you up. I got your face in front of me.
oh,
So I
okay.
feel like I'm talking to someone. Oh, sorry. Yes. So basically Heidegger is saying that our language is being formalization. So we're losing access to what is our natural language, which is, I think, I mean, he goes a lot into poetry as an example, but you also have a lot of it in the beginning with the discussion with the Japanese, where he opens up language just within the conversation. What I started to notice was that people were speaking um, in it, just out in the world, that there's this, I kept hearing this cause, and people were very hesitant to say anything that wasn't correct, that wasn't like cause and effect, that wasn't numerical, that wasn't agreeable. There was a lack of description, there was a lack of hesitation, there was a lack of ambiguity, there was a lack of, basically poesis in the language, and as soon as people would get up to that point, they'd back off or they'd apologize, or so I just started hearing that, and then I read that section where Heidegger goes into great depth about this. And it is a danger because we it's the same danger that exists with Gestell in the other realm, in the other ways. It's really no different. But language is important because it structures, us as I don't know if that's the right word, but that we lose access to the being of language, which is, I don't know, it's important to me. I just think, I'm a little tired, so I apologize. I'm not speaking very well.
Well, can I just say, so in what we read, the dialogue that Wendy mentioned, Heidegger points out, and I think I say this in the lecture as well, that it is European philosophical concepts that drive Gestell, to put it a bit it's a bit too simplistic, but is the precision of the philosophical concept that is itself, of course, born from Gestell, but also is how, in a sense, it spreads. So it doesn't even, again, it doesn't even require technological tools. It's a way of accessing the world that is then, to Heidegger, representational, ordering in a certain sense that would be different from what he refers to as the Japanese house of being, that is leaning more towards the ambiguous, the the ambivalent, perhaps even. But yeah, so Gestell is in a sense in charge of, or not in charge, but yeah, of language. Ravi?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'll have to start listening for that more in conversations. Um, yeah, I guess I don't have a exterior view to compare it to, but I can imagine like a very lively social or family oriented conversation might have dimensions that don't have this element of formalization and can um um veer into the poetic dimensions that you're talking about. So yeah, I'm curious to we'll start listening for this.
Yeah, I would just like to add that we don't change the language. We're not involved in changing it or even knowing if it will change. Um, so it's mainly, I think, an awareness of how we speak, a listening to ways in which we speak. I think, my concern is that if we lose access to the being of, to that realm, I don't know. But I mean, we have no say in it. I should stop talking. I'm sorry. I'm not very good. I'm not very good right now. I'm, yeah.
Okay, and I mean, we release you of your duties.
Thank you.
We have a perfect duty to humanity, to release you of your duties, to be a bit Kantian. Uh, Thank you. So I have Harris and Nathan and Christine on the list still. Um, Harris, because Nathan will have to I think Nathan is driving, so you'll have to pull over. Have I forgotten anyone? Oh, Marin. I've forgotten Marin, haven't I? Okay, Harris, you're next.
Yeah.
Oh, and Leo Harrington. That's embarrassing. Okay. Well, then you go after Harris because that was awful of me. Sorry. Harris, you go ahead.
Yeah. First of all, I would like to say that I really enjoyed all the presentations so far. And I think my presentation is somewhat on the same wavelength with Wendy's. So that's good. So I will begin by stating my intent. I will then proceed with the narration of a short essay entitled Sturm und Statik, Producing the Stream of Consciousness Style, or what I call Steam of Consciousness. Because what once got streamed in front of me, now merely it steams inside of the congress of my consciousness. Finally, I will conclude my presentation with some additional remarks. Sturm und Statik is conceived as a modern representation of a lineage that begins with the storm-driven passions of Sturm und Drang and runs through Heidegger's meditations on mood and the simultaneity of concealment and unconcealment. The late 18th century movement known as Sturm und Drang, literally meaning storm and stress, was a revolt against the rationalist claim of the Enlightenment. Writers such as Goethe and Schiller sought to elevate passion, individuality, and the sublime force of nature over the tidy order of reason. It was a literature of upheaval, a music of raw mood, of existential attunement before philosophy had the words for it. Heidegger, in his corpus, but also in his black notebooks and elsewhere, recognized this eruption of mood as a precursor to philosophy's own task. For him, truth or aletheia is not disclosed through calculation, but through the violent disclosure of being, a storm that tears open concealment. In this sense, Sturm und Drang was not merely a literary episode, but a cultural attunement to being itself, one that philosophy must learn from rather than tame. The vignettes gathered in this stream of consciousness that follows, or in the steam of consciousness, as I call it, are non-fictional, observational experiments, attempts that stage in modern urban settings the same storm of attunement that Sturm und Drang dramatize and that Heidegger sought to address and present to the world. They are not anecdotes for their own sake, but experimental moments in mood, movement, and attunement. Static noise pierced by the clarity of unmistaken signal. Violent storm, glimpse in the everyday. In other words, ephemeral and elusive instance that disclose eternity. The rationale behind my stream of consciousness is to show that such instances are not personal curiosities, but rather eruptions of the eternal within the unexpected and the exceptional. They are storm and static at once, fleeting yet pure, contingent yet timeless. In disclosing these momentary images, the intent is not to revive Sturm und Drang as a historical style, not to repeat Heidegger's philosophy, but to reenact their shared insight that mood, passion, and even static noise reveal truth more radically than any system or calculation. The storm is not past, it is here, in the static of the radio, in the streets of the city, in the caffeine-driven pulse of our consciousness. To seek the storm of the divided mind is to seek philosophy itself, not as a doctrine, but as lived attunement. Sturm und static, stream of consciousness. I woke up today with a vivid replay in my mind, a memory I had acquired seemingly from exactly 1 year ago to the day, while we were slowly cruising at night through San Francisco's most notorious street, the one near the Central Police Station. I saw there a ragged homeless man around my age, a junkie, an addict, a madman, engaged in an intense mumbling argument with a metal cylindrical dustbin. He was setting it on fire, shouting with a loud, almost preaching voice at the top of his lungs amidst his incoherent rambling. Seek the storm of the divided mind. How is it possible to extrapolate from the vividness of those rare ephemeral moments the timelessness of what is pure and eternal? I possess another such memory from 7 or 8 years ago in Valencia. Once again, I was a passenger, slowly cruising through the busy city streets. We arrived at one of those tiny roundabouts, almost a small semi-spherical bump in the road, and there was a carrion crow furiously defending the carcass of his dead partner from a murder of other scavenging crows. There is only one common denominator weaving these two disparate memories together. I am the passenger, much like Iggy Pop was in his famous song. What is this? Is it the apocalyptization of the old flaneur, born from the release of conscious focus that gets funneled into the act of driving through busy or not so busy city streets? Is it possible that it is the aloof passenger who is allowed to glimpse what others fail to see? And if so, is that a technologically mediated side privilege? Because to the driver, the technology simultaneously conceals and unconceals different things than it does to the mere passenger. Is there a way to elaborate further in an effort to better explain and understand what I am grasping here, with an example from the very same setting, but from the perspective of the lone driver? Yes, there is. Manually attune your car's radio to an off-tune station, one that is full of static, full of noise. Turn the volume just high enough to avoid triggering any latent misophonia and drive around the city. Every now and then, a random signal will come through crystal clear, breaking the static noise by announcing itself. In such a manner, one is able not to glimpse, but to hear the unconcealment by combining the movement of these two technologies, the radio and the vehicle. This is spatio-temporal, elusive, epochal, and ephemeral, yet the experimentation itself is pure, eternal even. Others are interested in Thomas Mann and Jean Baudrillard, or even Charles Baudelaire. I am interested in Alfred Jarry and Montesquieu. No, that last one is a lie. I was just going after the poetic lyrical rhyme. Alfred Jarry and Hans Weichinger, that is my cup of tea. Although I almost never have tea, I prefer to pour caffeine. And my final remarks. And so we wander, and so we drift, suspended in this informational epoch, carried by technological currents we neither direct nor resist. The storm and stress of Sturm und Drang has become the revelatory static of this age. It both conceals and unconceals in its own unique way. And we are wanderers of the digital ocean, drifting through the realm of the Gestalt, where technology, through its terminal screens, and frames and reveals, and distorts and reconciles. This whole endeavor is a homage to that lineage. From the storm-driven passions of Sturm und Drang through Heidegger's meditations on mood and the simultaneity of concealment and unconcealment, to our own era of technological wandering and meandering. To seek the storm is to seek attunement. To listen within the static is to hear being itself. To doom scroll through screens, to drift through city streets, to encounter the vibrant, rare signal, to hear the sudden outcry and break free through the static's closure, is to be attuned to being in its fleeting disclosure. The passenger glimpses what the driver cannot, and in that ephemeral glimpse, eternity erupts, and that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Harris. Very good. I'm glad you read it. You added quite a few things there, haven't you? Okay. Who wants to go first? And by the way, Leo, I'm sorry. So Nathan just notified me that he has got an appointment. He's very on tick today. So he'll go next, and then you. I've got you on the list now. Okay, so who's got a question? Christine, yep.
Thank you, Harris. That was amazing. I was very inspired by that. And your kind of the memoir elements were very cool. And I love the reference to Iggy Pop. And I was thinking while you're reading about, while you were talking about static, thinking about the composer John Cage and, bringing in noise and his piece, 4 minutes and 33 seconds, where the pianist is on stage but doesn't play anything. And it's just about being open to listening to what's happening at that moment. So anyway, I just wanted to share that.
Thank you very much, Christine. Yeah, that piece, piece of performance art by Cage, the 433. It was really something because it was for its own epoch, and it had to do with this element of transforming the experience. In a way, transforming and transposing the stage from the orchestra to the whole audience. So, yeah. Also, thank you for your kind words.
Any other questions? James, did you have a remark, Dr. Simkin?
I was just saying that I loved the vivid images there, Harris. Just a real kaleidoscope of thoughts with the crows and the homeless man, the static radio driving around, getting random messages coming through. Really great.
Thank you, James.
Any more? Nope. Okay. Well, then it's Nathan. Are you ready? Thank you, Harris. Okay, Nathan's ready in his car.
Yes. Today we are going to be enacting how you can use technological devices while still dwelling within the domain of poetic thinking.
Okay, good.
Okay. Right. Everybody can hear me okay?
Yes, very good, actually.
Oh, good. Okay, so this talk is inspired by something, is a question that Johannes posed, I think it was in the last seminar, which is why poetic language is crucial for the turn. And it's actually it's kind of a rehashing of some work that I did working on before I abandoned my dissertation. And I've sort of gone back, and so the overall project is on a phenomenological and ontological approach to authentic communication and wonder. So the topic is poetic language and the turning, Heidegger, technology, and the community of mortals, which is a particular topic that I'm very passionate about. So the introduction, the question of the turn. So this paper asks a simple but demanding question. Why does Heidegger's turn require poetic language? My claim is that what Heidegger calls the Kehre, the turn, is not primarily a change of his own philosophical position from an early to late Heidegger. The turn is first of all an ontological movement within being itself, a transformation in the way that being gives and withholds itself in the history of the West. Heidegger's later work does not abandon being in time. It tries to follow this movement of being, to think in step with a shift that is already happening within the event of being itself. In that sense, the turn is not a theoretical correction, but a reorientation of thinking, away from representing beings and towards responding to the self-showing and the self-concealing of being itself. Within the epoch of modern technology, which Heidegger names Gestell and framing, this ontological movement has this very specific character. Being withdraws into a mode in which beings show up primarily as resources to be ordered, optimized, and ultimately controlled. Heidegger understands this not as a merely cultural or economic phenomenon, but as a destining of being, a Geschick des Seins. The essence of technology is not a set of machines. It's a historical way of being which comes to presence and also hides within itself. The essence of technology is by no means anything technological, Heidegger states. If this turn is an ontological shift, the question becomes what kind of, quote, thinking can bring this movement to language without dragging us back under the regime of inframing? Heidegger's answer is radical. Only a poetic form of thinking and saying, called forth by being itself, is adequate. Conceptual, philosophical, and scientific language, insofar as they are shaped by the metaphysical tradition of the West, remains under the spell of Gestell. They are compelled to treat being as an object, a universal or something to be grasped and mastered. Poetic language, by contrast, actually belongs to being. It lets being speak rather than trying to speak about being. Heidegger famously writes that language is the house of being, and in its home, human beings dwell. Those who think and those who create with words are guardians of this home. The task is not to invent new linguistic techniques, but to learn how to listen, to cultivate a kind of hearing in which silence can speak, in which the unsaid and the withdrawal are allowed to come forth and to resonate. Therefore, the thesis of the paper is twofold. The Kehre is an ontological turn in the history of being, not merely a shift in Heidegger's philosophy, and that poetic language, grounded in Gelassenheit, or releasement and openness, is the only mode of thinking that can respond to this turn. Bring it to word and allow a new inception in the history of being to emerge within Gestell. To make this case, I'll first sketch Heidegger's account of modern technology and Gestell, and then turn to the Kehre as a turning within being, then unfold Gelassenheit as a non-quietistic comportment, and then show why poetic saying is essential to the turn, and then ultimately clarify what a free relationship to technology involves. and then consider the notion of a new inception in the history of being, and finally explore how Gelassenheit can become a shared way of being, a community of mortals dwelling poetically together. So first, Gestell, technology and the concealment of being. In the question concerning technology, Heidegger insists that technology cannot be adequately understood in instrumental or anthropological terms. As simple and neutral means is simply a neutral means to our ends or a set of human activities at all. These definitions are correct, but they're not true because they miss the deeper phenomenon, and that is the way that being itself is revealing itself in our technological age. Modern technology, argues, is a mode of revealing, Entbergen. A river that once appeared as a place of crossing and dwelling now shows up primarily as a water power supplier. The field becomes standing reserve of calories. Even the human beings become human resources. This way of revealing is governed by Gestell, usually translated as enframing. Enframing gathers together the various demands that we make on being into a single stance. Everything is challenged to present itself as calculable, usable, portable, and ultimately to be controlled. Heidegger emphasizes that Gestell is not something we freely choose, nor is it simply the sum of our technological devices or technologies. It's actually a destining of being, a sending, a Geschick, in which being itself organizes beings to appear as standing reserve. So the danger lies precisely here. Being endangers itself by concealing itself in the very revealing of beings as resources. As he puts it in the turning, enframing is being itself endangering itself in truth of its coming to presence, and thus remains veiled and disguised. The most extreme danger is not nuclear war, ecological collapse, or social breakdown. It's the calculative thinking, the mindset that orders everything in terms of efficiency and control. Quote, may someday come to be accepted and practiced as the only way of thinking, when everything that shows up is only material for optimization. Being, as such, disappears from view, and the question of being becomes literally unthinkable. Heidegger distinguishes sharply between technological devices and a technological understanding of being. The real threat on this reading is not the presence of machines, but the possibility that our entire sense of reality will collapse into a logic of optimization. In that case, the most terrifying future is not a dystopian catastrophe, but a perfectly managed, comfortable, frictionless world in which nothing truly matters. And yet, Heidegger insists that Gestell itself harbors a saving power. Quoting Holderlin, he states that the danger is that where the danger is grows the saving power also. And he claims that the essence of technology there hides a possibility of turning, Kier. The danger is that being conceals itself. The saving power is that its very concealment, if seen as such, as a concealment, can awaken us to being again. The question then is, what kind of thinking can inhabit this danger in a way that lets the saving power to come to light without either blindly pushing on with technology or some sort of helpless rebelling against it? The Kier, or the turning within being. Heidegger uses the word Kier, or turning, in several overlapping senses. It can be described as a shift in his own path of thought after being in time, but more fundamentally, it names an inner turning within the event of being itself. The turning, he writes, that in framing comes to presence as the danger, and that being turns about into the oblivion of its coming to presence, and then turns away from this coming to presence, and in that way simultaneously turns counter to the truth of its coming to presence. That was a quote from Heidegger. This turn is not a human initiative. It's a movement of being in which the very self-concealing the danger can become a site where being flashes up. Heidegger is explicit that the turning of the danger does not mean any sort of abolishment of technology. If a change in being, i.e. how, quote, if a change in being, i.e. now, in the coming of presence of enframing comes to pass, then this in no way means that technology, whose essence lies in enframing, will be done away with. Technology will not be struck down, and it most certainly will not be destroyed. The turn is not a project of overcoming technology from the outside, as if we could step out of Gestell and will and design a new world. That attempt to finally master technology to get under control remains itself technological. Instead, it involves a withdrawal, a going under, a turning back into the clearing. It is a movement of being in which the self-concealment that's at work in Gestell becomes visible for the first time as such, and thus another relation of being can emerge. And Heidegger speaks of a, quote, sudden self-lighting, which the clearing belonged to the essence of being suddenly clears itself and lights up. The turn is like a lightning flash, Einblick, or an insight that brings into view the fact that our technological world rests on a hidden gift, a clearing in which things can appear at all. Heidegger names this transformation, the transition from the first inception of Greek metaphysics to another beginning. The first inception interpreted being as constant presence and what can be made secure in concepts and categories. The other beginning thinks being as event and as the play of disclosure and withdrawal. It's a dancing. The Kier is the trembling of this tradition, the resonance between an ending history of metaphysics and a not yet history of the event. The decisive point for our purposes is this. If the turn is an ontological movement, it calls for a corresponding transformation in our way of speaking and listening. This is my main concern. It cannot be captured by the language of representation, planning, and control. It calls for a mode of thinking that can dwell in the clearing, attuned both to the saying and what remains unsaid. That mode, Heidegger increasingly insists, is poetic thinking grounded in Gelassenheit. So now we look at Gelassenheit as a releasement without quietism. A key word in Heidegger's later thought is Gelassenheit, usually translated as releasement or letting be. In the conversation on A Country Path about thinking, he describes Gelassenheit as a double comportment, a releasement toward things and a mystery to the openness. It's the stance that allows us to dwell or be with technological devices as both a yes and a no, to use them when appropriate, but to refuse to let them dictate our way of being in the world. Crucially, Gelassenheit is not a quietism. It's not a resignation. It's not passivity opposed to an active desire to control that we see in Gestell. If we take it as a mere passivity, as something withdrawing from the world and waiting for something to happen, we're still imprisoned within the active-passive dichotomy that belongs to Gestell. The willful compulsion to control is mirrored, or it's you called it like a photographic negative, I think, at one point.
Heidegger does.
Kind of, yeah. Oh, Heidegger does. Oh, okay.
Yes.
Is mirrored by a willful attempt to not will, a flee into some pure inner state, both remaining within the technological logic of and in order to, and the drive to secure outcomes. Heidegger's point is much more subtle. In Gelassenheit names a comportment that does not fit into any active-passive schemata at all. It's an embodied receptivity, a readiness. One of the clearest analogies for me comes from authentic meditation. In genuine meditation, there is no goal in the usual sense. You cannot try to meditate in order to achieve enlightenment or stress reduction without actually corrupting the practice itself. The harder you strive to, quote, empty your mind, the more that you turn meditation into a technological project, a technique for producing a desired state, some sort of optimized performance or something. Authentic meditation involves a kind of active non-action, reminiscent of the Taoist idea of wu wei. Is letting go is itself a subtle activity, but it's not a controlling one. You sit, you breathe, you notice thoughts that arise and pass away without clinging or resistance. Neither chase nor suppress them. What matters is not the result of the stance, but the way in which you comport yourself in the midst of whatever appears. Gelassenheit works analogously then. It does not ask us to smash our smartphones or somehow live off of the grid. Nor does it ask us to worship technology as a savior, as is becoming so prevalent. It invites us to stand slightly outside of the spell of enframing, what Johannes calls standing outside of the specter of Gestell. To see it as a a historical revealing and concealing rather than the ultimate truth of things. As Heidegger puts it, modern humanity, quote, must first and above all find its way back into full breadth of the space proper to its essence, the space in which it can experience itself as needed and used by being. So to gain a free relationship to technology, which Heidegger invites us to do, we must recognize that our technological understanding of being is given. It is not chosen. It is our destiny, but it is not our fate. Once we experience this destiny as a gift we receive rather than some sort of tool that we wield, we have already stepped, however slightly, maybe put our toe outside of the technological stance, and we become able to say both yes and no to technology, to integrate it into a larger horizon in which it is no longer absolute. Gelassenheit then is neither a reactionary or escapist. It's a vigilant stillness. It's an allowing the noise of the constant doing and settling upon something else. It's a vigilant stillness that allows the noise of constant doing and busyness to settle until something else can be heard. In that stillness, being itself withdraws. Being's self-withdrawal in Gestell, I should say, can appear as such, and the turn towards another beginning can begin to speak. Why, though, so poetic saying as the language of the turn? Why, though, must the response to Kier take the form of poetic language? Why is philosophical prose, even if Heidegger's own early style, not enough? Heidegger's answer runs through the text like poetry, language, and thought, and on the way to language, he insists it is not a neutral tool that we use to label things we already understand. Language itself is a mode of being's own self-disclosure. Language is the house of being, he writes. In its home, human beings dwell. That means how being gives itself is inseparable from how language speaks. Just one second.
Was
Sorry.
Was this the police?
That's my client.
Okay.
That's so funny. Heidegger's answer runs through the text like poetry, language, and thought, and on the way to language, as Wendy spoke earlier. Language, he insists, is not a neutral tool that we use to label things we already understand. Language is itself a mode of being self-disclosure. Language is the house of being, he writes. In its home, human beings dwell. That means how being gives itself is inseparable from how language speaks. In the age of Gestell, ordinary discourse, scientific, technical, and even much of the philosophical language is deeply shaped by the metaphysical tradition. It tends to treat words as labels for objects, as handles by which to manipulate and transmit information. This is not wrong, it should be said. It is a genuine and powerful mode of revealing, but it is structurally incapable of doing justice to the event character of being, to the play of presence and absence that's at work in the kid. So poetic language, by contrast, does not primarily function as representation at all. It lets things be by letting them come to word in their own way. And Heidegger reads many of the poets who say being, not by defining it, but by bringing the world into a more originary appearing. Poets like Holderlin and Schrockle and Rilke. In the essence, the nature of language, he writes, language speaks. Man speaks in that he responds to language. Language is the primal dimension within man's essence, is first capable of responding to being and its claim, and in co-respondence actually belongs to being. Poetic saying is the correspondence, the Entsprechen, a responsive saying that does not impose concepts on being, but answers to being's own call. This is why Heidegger insists that Tehir requires a transformation within language itself. The turn is a shift in how being speaks, and so it demands a shift in how we comport ourselves, how we listen and respond to being speaking. Heidegger's own later writing performs this shift. It becomes more elliptical, more repetitive, more etymological, and yes, more poetic. He's not doing philosophical etymology for its own sake. He's trying to hear the unthought resonance in the words Eragnis, Entbergen, Gelassenheit, Gestell, that can hint at the event of being more faithfully than our own inherited conceptual vocabulary. This does not mean that we abandon rigor. In fact, it means that rigor itself must be redefined, not as formal clarity, but as a fidelity and attentiveness to the way being gives itself. In destitute times, he says, the poet must, quote, attend, singing, to the trance of the fugitive gods. That is, the poet keeps open the space where the divine, the holy, the withdrawn can still be sensed, even if only a little, even when the gods have, quote, fled. In this sense, poetic language is not decorative add-on to philosophy. It's the only mode of saying that can actually inhabit the turn without dragging it back into the metaphysics of presence. It lets the turn be what it is, a movement of being that exceeds our plans and all of our projects and in order to's and for sake of which, and yet cause us to respond. The danger, the saving power, and a free relation to technology. We can now return to Heidegger's claim that in the essence of technology, the danger and the saving power are actually the same. In the turning, he writes, the self-denying of the truth of being, which entraps itself with oblivion, harbors the favor as yet ungranted, that this self-entrapping will turn about, that in such turning, oblivion will turn and become the safekeeping belonging to the coming to presence of being, instead of allowing that coming to presence to fall into disguising. So the turn is a movement of man to being and being to man, so that they actually become comported to each other newly. Heidegger's point is subtle. The oblivion itself, if seen as oblivion, can become a safekeeping. When we recognize Gestell not as just an unfortunate social system, but a self-withdrawal of being, we are no longer simply victims or managers of technology. We become participants in the turn, needed and used for the restoring, my favorite word, surmounting of the essence of technology. We must learn to see our technological understanding of being as historical clearing that we did not create. When we experience it as such, we can neither worship nor demonize it. We gain what Heidegger calls a releasement towards things. Quote, we let technological devices enter our daily life and at the same time leave them outside. That is, we let them alone as things which are nothing absolute but remain dependent upon something higher. This something higher is not a metaphysical God or an abstract value system. It's the clearing itself, the event of being in which both technology and its critique become possible. To be open to this clearing is what Heidegger called an openness to mystery. Without such openness, our attempts to quote, solve the problem of technology remain merely technological, more planning, more regulation, more mastery. Heidegger is therefore skeptical of both a naive techno-optimism and also a romantic anti-technology. Both, in their own way, refuse to tarry with the danger. The optimistic believes that a better technology will simply fix the problem caused by technology. And the romantic believes that if we just smash all of our machines and return to some sort of imagined golden age or past, the danger will vanish. And both miss Heidegger's point that danger is ultimately technological, not merely technical. This is why Heidegger can say with disarming bluntness that only a God can save us now. This is not a call for deus ex machina, a supernatural intervention that would cancel our responsibility. It's a way of saying we cannot will a new clearing into being. A new world, a genuinely different understanding of what matters can arrive as a gift, as an event that gathers practices and meanings around a new center. Heidegger sometimes calls such a center a God, not necessarily a theological deity, but whatever gives people their shared sense of meaning and reality. In the meantime, the task is to keep the space open for such a transformation, to resist closure, to protect these marginal, non-efficient practices like love, friendship, listening to a river, telling stories, watching a sunset. These are not ultimately reducible to standing reserve. These practices can later become seeds for a new cultural paradigm. And if a new, quote, God gathers around them into a world. Thus, the saving power that grows where danger is does not consist in a plan or a fixing technology. For fixing technology. It consists in the possibility that our encounter with extreme in framing will awaken a more originary listening to being, and that this listening will eventually crystallize into new forms of shared life. We're almost there. Heidegger often speaks of the Seingeschichte as the history of being. This does not mean a chronological record of opinions or approaches or discussions about being. It means the sequence of historical epochs in which being grants itself in different basic understandings. Being as idea, being as presence, being as will, being as objectivity, being as a standing reserve. Each epoch is a sending of being that shapes how beings can appear and what counts for us as real. The Kier marks the tradition from the first inception, the Greek metaphysics and all that's unfolded, to what Heidegger calls the beginning or a new inception. In the first inception, being was implicitly understood as constant presence, as what can be grasped and secured in concepts, categories, and ultimately systems of thinking. This understanding fueled the rise of metaphysics, science, and eventually modern technology. In texts like The Resonating, Heidegger suggests that the West now stands at evening, at the time when this first inception has exhausted itself, and the planetary spread of technology, the collapse of traditional metaphysics and religious frameworks, and the rise of a global technocracy these are not random events, they're a final consequence of the first beginning. The new inception Heidegger anticipates is not a simple rejection of the first. It's more like a twisting free, an Entwindung, a returning to the more inceptual beginning that was already stirring in the original Greek thinking, especially thinkers like Heraclitus before Plato's metaphysics, consolidated and put us on a particular path, our destiny. The other beginning would think being not as a highest being or ultimate grounds, but as an event that grants and withholds. In this new inception, beings would understand themselves no longer as masters and possessors of nature, nor as subjects confronting objects, but as mortals, needed and used by being to keep the clearing open. Our essence would be defined not by control or autonomy, but by finitude and openness, by the capacity to die, to let beings be, and to respond to what is given. Heidegger is clear that this new inception cannot be engineered. It cannot be the outcome of a revolutionary paradigm, a new ideology, or some sort of technological fix. At most, we can prepare for it by learning to dwell in the clearing in a way that is attuned, grateful, and receptive. That preparation is ultimately poetic. Poetic, therefore, lived in Gelassenheit, keeps alive the memory of what was forgotten at the origin, the sheer strangeness that there is a world at all, and that beings appear rather than nothing. If, when a new inception arrives, it will reveal itself in new practices, new institutions, new forms of art, and ultimately in community, in a new way of being human on Earth. But whatever it looks like, its language will be essentially poetic because it will be born from a deeper listening to the speaking of being. Okay, finally. Gelassenheit and the community of mortals. As we move towards our conclusion, let us consider how this stance of releasement, this Gelassenheit, is not a solitary path for some heroic, authentic individual. For Heidegger, beings are always Mitsein. They're always being with one another. Even the most solitary thinker is shaped by a shared world. In embracing Gelassenheit together, we form what Heidegger calls a community of mortals, a gathering of those who share in the finitude and wonder of existence. Mortals, in Heidegger's sense, are not simply those who happen to die biologically. They are those who experience death as death, who can let the fact of their finitude shape how they live. Death is not, for Heidegger, a defect to be overcome, as in some transhumanist fantasies of uploading consciousness or somehow conquering aging like Brian Johnson. Death belongs to the very essence of Dasein. It is the possibility of the absolute impossibility of Dasein. It is what makes us the kind of beings who can care, who can choose, and can take responsibility. The technological attempt to abolish death, like the turning of the human body into a set of data to be optimized infinitely, would thus amount to a kind of self-annihilation. Self-annihilation would erase the very finitude that makes us who we are. In this sense, the turning of technology into a boogeyman to be defeated or somehow a tool of transcending our humanity are mirror images. Both refuse to dwell within our own mortal condition. A community of mortals, by contrast, takes finitude as its shared ground. Such a community does not merely use the world, it listens to it, it dwells with it, and it allows each being to show itself as it is. In Building Dwelling Thinking, Heidegger describes dwelling as the basic character of being, in keeping with which mortals exist. Mortals dwell by staying within the fourfold of earth, sky, divinity, and mortals, letting these dimensions mirror and belong with one another. Headphones just died, ironically, so I'm going to conclude. We begin with the claim that Heidegger's Kehr is an ontological turning within being itself, and that only poetic language, grounded in Gelassenheit and openness to mystery, is an adequate response to this turn. In the age of Gestell, where beings show up primarily as resources, the danger is that calculative thinking becomes only one way of thinking. The saving power lies in recognizing this danger as a self-concealment of being, and thus a possible site for a reawakening. Gelassenheit names the stance that allows us to inhabit this danger without either surrendering to it or reacting against it in a merely technological way. It is a letting be that is neither passive nor willful, akin to the active non-action expression of genuine meditation. Poetic saying is the linguistic form of this stance. It's a responsive, listening speech that lets beings be and that keeps open the space where another beginning might arise. We have seen that gaining a free relationship to technology means seeing our technological understanding of being as a historical gift rather than some sort of ultimate truth. It frees us to use devices without being used by them, to say a thoughtful yes and no, and it prepares us to receive what Heidegger calls another God, some new center of meaning that could gather our scattered practices into a world. And finally, we consider how Gelassenheit becomes a shared way of being and gives rise to a community of mortals who dwell poetically on earth. Such a community is not a program or a plan. It's something that happens wherever people let themselves be claimed by the clearing, by the sheer fact that there is a world and that we are finite beings within it. And perhaps the best way to end is with the poet who, in many ways, says what Heidegger is reaching for. In the Four Quartets, T.S. Eliot writes, "We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all of our exploring will be to arrive where we started and to know the place for the first time."
Thank you. Excellent. Wonderful. I mean, you could just extend this a bit and then submit your PhD. And you really are already gelassen in between how many appointments today? You just sit down
Yeah.
and do that. Do you have to run now? Do you have time?
Yeah, well, I can take they're already inside, so I can take a couple of questions if people have anything that they want to ask.
Are there any questions at this moment? Albert?
Boy, a lot of questions.
Yeah.
How do you see what you refer to as the clearing? What do you see that as other than saying it's a clearing? What do you see that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I try to keep these things as jargon free as possible. The challenge is that the clearing is a non-conceptual kind of thing. I see it as a non-subjective experience. I don't even know if that's the right word. The clearing is the
Can I ask him?
it's the place where being. Go ahead.
I was going to say, can I ask a more precise question? How do you see the relationship of clearing to being versus Dasein?
Okay, that's so the relationship. So in Being and Time, I think that Dasein was sort of the clearing. So this is my interpretation. It's the place in which it's a non-subjective place in which being kind of could arise, and kind of worlds are set up in that clearing. And I think in later, the clearing actually becomes more on the side of being, if I can say it that way. And Dasein is a way of being that humans have that participate in the revealing, being's own revealing. So it's like being is revealing itself through the human being is kind of the best way that I can understand what the Lichtun or the clearing is.
Yeah,
I don't know if that answers.
Yeah, there's definitely, I mean, it seems to me that there's definitely a relationship to what you just said. But yeah, I wanted to see if that's what you see based on your presentation in terms of the self-disclosing you're referring to, and where the place of the human being is in relationship to being, big B. Because what seems to be happening with Gestalt is the realm of the mode of being where being exists without beings and vice versa, where the human being exists without being, the big B. And the mode of being where being appears in its true essence is where being and beings are together. So that's kind of the two ends that and I don't know if there's, but that's kind of what was going through my mind when I think about Gestalt, because Gestalt is basically a mode of being where, beings don't need being. The human being is in this state where it's disassociated from being. That's kind of but maybe that's reading too much, or I was trying to see if what you saw in the word clearing as a way of getting access to that. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think in Gestalt, all we experience is beings in their use. So the being of beings withdraws completely. So we don't have any access to being itself because the standing reserve is so complete in that sense. But I don't know if that helps with the elucidating what we mean by the clearing or the site in which being emerges. I mean, I think if we think of seeing technology as, when Gestalt is revealed as what it is, we can see that the whole world in which we live in, all of our practices, the way that things matter to us, all emerge from that mode. So it's kind of like that. The clearing is in which the being arises, and then it kind of lights up a whole world. And so I don't know. I think it's an attempt to get away from thinking about this in any psychological sense or as a subject over and against objects. So the clearing is kind of a thinking that is prior to all of that, if that makes sense. So in my business, when we work with people in communication, just as an example, we try to think about communication prior to I'm talking to you, and there's me, an I or a thou, even an I or a thou. It's a space or a clearing in which communication is happening without prior to breaking it down into words and people talking to each other and dialogue in that sense. So I don't know if that helps it out or not.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's an initial openness, and Gestell is, in a sense, the clearing, and it's and to be aware or mindful of the clearing for self-concealment, or there is concealment in Gestell, but what it sort of pretends is that there is no hiding. It hides its hiding. It's verstellt sein Verstellen. I think, was it Gerald who quoted this before? Verstellen is even a bit worse than just hiding, because verstellen is sinister, So I don't want to say too much here. Any more questions for Nathan before you've got to run? Any more? No? Well, Nathan, thank you very much. Very good.
Thank you, man. This was kind of a coming together of all of the courses that I've taken with you. This paper has been evolving. So this is the first course where I feel like I finally kind of understood where the role of language. So I appreciate you asking that question in one of these seminars, because it was like the thing I felt like was missing for me. So
yeah,
thanks for putting this together.
Well, thank you. And see you at Hegel.
Yeah. In 2 weeks' time, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, Professor Harrington, finally. Your turn.
Oh, got to unmute. Okay. Given that Nathan has just done the introduction, I'm going to just skip, as I said I was going to anyway, to the end of what I wrote, where I'm going to recite 2 poems.
Yep.
I was thinking I should do a segue about why, but yeah, poetry is the language we should be using. So why not just go straight to it? You know, so um, my younger brother has Alzheimer's. He has been in a nursing home for 3 years now. And as a footnote, at some point after about 1 year there, they throw you out of the rooms every now and then. And so I wandered around, and they have, bookshelves with a hodgepodge. And I found this. And Nathan referred to the community of mortals with poetic language. Goethe, Schiller, Holderlin. So this is my copy. I bought it because I didn't want to steal it from the place where my brother is now. And I put it back on the shelf, their copy. And then a year or two ago, year and a half ago, I couldn't, I didn't know where it was. Maybe it was thrown out, but somebody took it. I don't know. And then the incident I'm about to relate, which took place in August, occurred on a day when I was visiting my brother, and once again wandering around when I was couldn't be in his room or with him. The book was back on the shelf, and the incident I'm about to relate took place with that book in my hands. Not my copy, the one from the nursing home. Okay, let me go to my spot. My younger brother has Alzheimer's. He has been in a nursing home for 3 years now. Everything has been and is being taken from him. Speech, walking, his hands, his eyesight. He can't say anything unless he looks straight ahead, and so on. Everything is being or has been taken from him. His two grown children do not know what or how to think or feel anymore. But in 1994, I wrote a poem thinking of my younger brother and, through extension, thinking of all of us. While with him in August of this year, while holding that book in my hand, the poem came to me. I by then, knew it by heart, and a response to my poem came, which I felt coming out of me and wrote as an epilogue. So I will now simply recite the poem and the epilogue, and then some comments, and then one more poem after that. The poem is called An Embrace. The distance between two hearts seems so great. Two stars semaphoring in their unreachable skies. The weary setting arms, each flashing a single message. That single beam of light that is each heart itself. Yet hearts do touch. They continuously touch, moment with distant moment, sometimes in bewilderment, like a hurt or indifferent noonday sun, sometimes in communion, like a precious star seen in that self same dampened light of dusk and dawn, sometimes in compassion, like moon-bent sunlight, genuflecting to a sky of intimate stars. Yet, moment after faded moment, the vast separating space remains. But I must believe, that all those moments of each lifetime, those bewildered fingers holding forth their sacred hosts of bent radiance, those mismatched heartbeats, when at last awoken from this hollow jumble of time, do coalesce, do reform and entwine into a gentle, all-encompassing embrace, and hearts do meet and are seen to have nestled together always in that closeness out of time. That's what I wrote 30 years ago. But this August, while sitting with my brother, not even knowing whether he had recognized me, him unable to even tell me if he had, this emerged from within me, and I just felt it coming. And I wrote, "The distance remains, increases, yet loving hearts do nestle together always. The tyrant time can measure out its vast separations, and unfeeling thought can, spellbound, acquiesce to time's unloving dictates. But loving hearts simply do nestle together always. They simply do." And that last three words, all three are capitalized. They simply do. That they simply do is just me recognizing a personal foundational axiom that overrides all others, personal or impersonal. The axiom securing the phenomenon of me and my younger brother. Two mortals, each as sky to each with its hidden granting, together forming a united fourfold. Now, to put this in context, though, in 2005, I wrote a poem expressing my felt sense of my own being towards death. By then, I had been with Heidegger actively, say, for at least a decade. And as a quick summary, here is the one sentence summary, which I have found myself often sharing during the last year. I believe in the gifts of what will be. They ripen and fall into time's stream. And I hadn't actually recognized it until I forget it. I think it happened before Nathan's talk, but it was just coming. You just saw that happening with me. That's what happened in August. I have received my brother's Alzheimer's, his total withdrawal in any physical sense from us, as the gift of what will be as it ripened and fell into my time stream. It is a gift, and it has given me that insight into just my own life. It wasn't a willful axiom. It was just a recognition that it's there. And I sure didn't recognize it 30 years ago when I wrote the body of the poem. So here is my poem expressing my felt sense of my own being towards death. And, for those who worry about these, just to clue you in, it's only 7 stanzas long. Each stanza has 6 lines. The lines are like 8 syllables. So you can time it. So here is my expression of my own personal being towards death. The poem is called Living Mortal. I am truly where I'm going. I, in truth, am what I'll be. Truth is but a debt yet owing, borrowed from that future me. dwelling in that twilight haven where death meets me mortally. There, in life, I am completed, no debt owed to what will be. Options there are all depleted. Me in death is all I see. No accord with image graven there deflects my death from me. In that haven, twilight gloaming, dwells my truth, my mortal me. Far from there, I live life roaming, all in search of what will be. All around me, my pain pleading. Harvests, speak your mystery. All around me, mute disguises intone my mortality as my havens distant prizes from my mortal self to me. I indwell their silent heeding, hearkening their gifts to be. Hearken as the tender keeping of the tears of you and me counters with our mortal weeping life's undying fallacy. Here's the source of life's pure water. To have true life, death must be. Sailing upstream on my river, I embrace mortality with the gifts it will deliver from its source at what will be. Dance of givens and their giver, floating freely down to me. I am truly where I'm going. I, in truth, am what I'll be. Mortal truth is ever owing what its gifting needs of me, enthralled in the call of flowing, living mortal, dying free. Ooh.
Yeah, how do you do this? That's how you do this. No? Yeah, there we go.
Oh,
This is what they this is yeah, bitte, bitte. This is what they call a beautiful mind, Leo. That's you.
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
Well, now I'm extra grateful that you've returned to our shows.
Yeah, well, if should I tell them why I returned?
Yeah, you of course I don't.
I returned because his original version of the seminar was actually going to devote one meeting to the essay "The Danger."
Yeah.
So he tricked me into coming, but I'm really glad I came.
I did well. No, the course didn't come together as such. It would have been a 10 weekend seminars. I think less is more. No, it was these are really beautiful poems, I have to say. And who would like to say something? There's many comments in the chat here. Is anyone who wants to comment or ask something?
It took me a month to write that last poem, I don't remember how long it took the first one. So, you know, I'm mortal. I I don't have a month to reply to whatever you ask me. So, I apologize in advance. Whatever stupid answer I give.
Christine.
I just think it's incredible to write a poem about your own death. So I thought that was really great. The last poem that you wrote.
Yeah, well, I mean, I clearly understand that. I mean, oh, but by the way, I mean, it's actually in part a response poem. There's a poem by an English poet, Philip Larkin, called Obad, Aubade, which is a poem about the coming of dawn, and where he's writing about death as it is in the world of Gestalt understood. He ends his poem with, it stands clear as a wardrobe. What we know have always known. Know that we can't escape it, can't accept. One side will have to go. And he just goes the other way than my poem and mentions how, the sun is up. Postmen go from door to door like doctors because we need the distraction. But I mean, once I'm a mathematician. Once you get to a certain point, how can you not write that? I mean, I can't prove it, but the next best thing is a poem.
Also, to see your younger brother basically
Yeah.
disappear is because you saw him grow up and come to be.
It's a very intimate relation, I realized over time, in that my very first retained memory was of the day he became home from being born from the hospital. And it took me well into adulthood before I figured out why, because it was just, when it happened, I don't know anything, but every day thereafter, my life was different because before he came from the hospital, I was the younger brother. I was not an older brother. And his birth made me an older brother. And in my family, that made me something. He still is making me that.
Yeah, yeah.
He is the granting that makes me
That
the
made you.
enduring older brother.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, very important to me anyway.
Yeah, well, sky of intimate stars. I like this notion also of they simply do.
Yeah.
No cause, no reason.
Mm-mm. No, and in my mind, if I can say something, Phil, I'm conflating nowadays Kant's a priori with the clearing, with the ecstatic realm.
Yeah.
It's the realm where spontaneity can happen. Once you enter your own world of understanding, the understand, you've trapped yourself. You can't be spontaneous anymore. At least that's the way it always felt to me in my life. That's
Yeah.
what mathematician. You have to extinguish anything of your own in order to actually produce anything to the other mathematicians. They don't want to hear from you. It's got to be a proof. But in the other realm, the a priori, the ecstatic, it's all spontaneous.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Now you know why I dropped the danger. I had to. It was spontaneous. I couldn't do any other.
Well, I think that's true. It's somewhere, in the murky realm of these things, you made grounding decisions of who you are, and that
Yeah.
they, in your world of understand, you dictated that you drop the danger.
Ecstatically. And I simply did. Thank you so much, Leo. Now you're Leo. You're no longer Professor Harrington now. Well, you
Finally.
still. No, no. That was wonderful, beautiful. Okay, we have Maren and then Christine. Christine comes last because she doesn't want to be published, which makes it so much easier for me to edit the whole thing in the end. Maren.
Okay, so this will probably be painless, I hope. Compared to what you guys have put out today, it's really shameful actually, but nonetheless, it's what occurred to me. It's what opened up to me during the course. Having spent the last weeks immersed in Heidegger, especially the question concerning technology, I didn't move so much toward an essay as I did toward just what amounts to just things that opened up to me, that occurred to me. And whatever connections appear or don't appear, it's the course that it grounds it. If I drift into wild associations, as the doctor likes to put it, that's a charge I'm willing to accept. But because of the course, or really because Heidegger's attempt to pry our minds from the surface carried in me so much flotsam and jetsam, a kind of recasting of my ruminations, speculations I'd written down over the years. They just tended to get small and brittle and eventually just turned into little dust blooms, really. And strangely, the ones that held best were from when I was very young. So this turned back into childhood thinking, childhood judgments, returned with a surprising force. Movies and art, of course, also took on some new shapes as well. I hadn't really, I work every day, so I hadn't really dived into anything ever in my life until I started taking these courses with the doctor. So this is it's really surprising, really, actually, that I thought I knew something. The movie that most clearly puts House of Being on display for me is also one of my favorites, and also at the same time it shows the heights of Gestell. Is Sofia Coppola's Lost in Translation. The subtlety, the nuance that the two protagonists stand against, they stand against almost a kabuki type of surroundings. It's Tokyo, is the setting. It gives the feeling of a place that's arranged for the immediacy of ordering, Bestand, and embraces Gestell. Yet within that setting, something quieter does break through, something that has the mark of realization in the two main characters' little island of connection that you're exposed to. It's no simple encounter of English and Japanese or West and East, because both the protagonists speak English and are from America, by the way. It's an encounter between really the houses of being, or because of it, there's out of a storm of summons of ordering breaks this pure love between the two characters. Bottom line, is worth seeing after taking this course. Certain poems came to mind. Certain poems came to mind as well. That Novalis, for whatever reason, even though I don't think Heidegger had any connection to Novalis, or I don't know that he even talked on Novalis at all. But things that I like. Blake is probably my favorite poet, but Novalis seemed to hit on some things that I was reminded of one of the few poems I know by him, which is the Hymns of the Night. And I'm going to read an excerpt from that I think really exposes some, something that Heidegger must have been influenced by, I would think. Also, what opened up is that Heidegger's way of showing things, unfolding, it does something with time that's really strange. And I was writing down things like the hydrogen bomb lay within the ancient Romans, and or for that matter, drone warfare, I guess, could lay in the ancient Romans. That we carry such possibilities with us far longer than we can usually be accounted for in his method, I think. One of the things that I wrote on was, for instance, how the movement of charcoal in the Chauvet cave, a cave that was discovered in 1994, those chalk strokes on limestone, they stand in the same long field of possible, or really the possibility of being, as if the way that I wrote here, a defunct genius bent over a still dipped pen, scratching on leaves of paper in the British Museum. One of my heroes is somehow scraping the same surface as a cave painter, and they spilled over entire peoples over at once, at the same time, in that continuous stroke across eras. Also, out of the reading, what also opened up to me, I should say, is the way in which we meet like this, which forms would seem to reveal to me or seem to become a kind of a new geography. Although I'll grant it a 2D geography, and it was just it reminded me. I hate to say this. I wasn't going to say this, but I'm going to go ahead and say it. So it kind of reminded me of probably what motivates flat earthers, which is this idea of being able to move into an endless space away from a controlling center. That there's always more land to move to and to strike your own way. But certainly this platform, or just the way in which it's developing, is certainly a new geography in which that can happen. And it just happens to be in English, becoming a world language. What might make it ironic, though, because as I continue to go through the course for another strange thing that another wild association was Miguel de Cervantes, his Don Quixote, my absolutely favorite book, and it started to get recast as a gesture towards rising technics within a nation in decline. With a lightly veiled critique of the church's impotence before those coming transformations in 1600s, the encounter with the windmills, the fulling mills, the water hammers, its uneasy stance toward the forced labor that keeps those systems afloat. All of it carries a sense of a world where hidden forms of power gather strength. And Cervantes, he may even stand as one of the first philosophers of the modern era in this respect, in my view, because he sheltered his thinking beneath the form of the novel, as if in inventing the novel, invention itself serves as a cover needed for thought. Now, this may be far-fetched, because it kind of is, but Gestel shows something, and all of these things are far-fetched, but Gestel shows something when we look back into the order, a long gathering of forces that appear suddenly as modern. I'll also read one of my poems today. Thankfully, one of the shorter ones, and so that will be towards the end there. I wanted to shorten this, and I didn't want to have to. Well, something else that opened up during our study is how the tendency we tend to accept how we view the ancient thought. A major component of Heidegger was looking at the Greek origins of a lot of words, or even the ideas and the thoughts. And we tend to have in everyday parlance anyway, we have a hollow conception of their thinking. And I see this even in legitimate, books that get published by doctors that seem to continue, continue to hold this linear progression of technology, and how the ancients were primitive, and now we're advanced, and all of you understand that well, that's very dug in our day. One of the things that I wrote on was how ancient divination offers a clear example of this. What is dismissed as superstition, augury, omen, divination can be seen as a form of distributed cognition within nature, and a tentativeness we can barely imagine today. To divine the flight of birds makes the bird's eyes your own, but after a long apprenticeship and attunement to seeing that. In their day, the sky would darken with flocks, which carried the movements of weather, migration, and armies across the horizon. In addition, dietary decline, plague, or the fouling of the water supply could be revealed in the animal's innards, especially evident in the damage of the liver. These were diagnostic acts of integration, where in our times we necessarily divide these acts into a disconnected array, and then we call the ancient whole as primitive. And in fact, the way in which I formed that thought is actually, kind of goes into Gestalt, because it's a technical forming of that thought. So we can't even escape it. But certainly they are not primitive. They far surpass us in so many ways. And if you think about it, we've hardly moved an nth from them in some ways. They had an unaided grasp of the states of matter: earth, solid, water, liquid, air, gas, fire, plasma, and we've lost the path back to a lot of these ways. Those we haven't gone far enough. We don't go far enough in science, and then in other ways we don't even have a path back, such as ecological divination. Our skies have tattered blankets in place of the flocks that they had. Our plains are devoid of free-ranging life that informed their judgments. So it's no wonder we scarcely fathom, how such reading is even possible today. And lastly, what also made itself known is what Dr. Simkin had talked about, which is the gamification in our day of who lives and who dies. It's a hyper deadly modern world, and there's a strange sheltered homelessness that comes to be. So we don't outgrow that superstition. We recklessly displace it. They see omens, and we see stock indices. Theirs guided survival, ours accumulation. Gestell shows only one revealing, and it presses towards ordering, summering, and flattening. But in the turn, another revealing glimmers, something quieter, where the front door stands open. The ancients lived in an ecstatic openness to time's unfolding. Their practices kept them in the revealing, concealing play of presence and absence. They did not seek to place through a final moment. They moved more as a coming to pass, as Heidegger puts it. And to read this again in our times is an attempt to stand where they stood. And it's in a dwelling, or really stand where they stand, in a dwelling that has not yet been stripped of richer ways of being, with mortality, with nature, with time, and with one another. That's what I wrote there. And now, if you won't mind, I will. Hymns to the Night. This is just this is section 4 of Hymns to the Night. I'm going to read. I really saw something in. Again, a lot of recasting, and one of them is that Novalis is not one of the great poets, I thought, but maybe he is one of the great poets, because this is pretty great. This is part 4 of the Hymns of the Night. Now I know when will come the last morning, when the light no more scares away the night and love, when sleep shall be without waking, and but one continuous dream. I feel in me a celestial exhaustion. Long and weariful was my pilgrimage to the holy, and the crushing was the cross. The crystal wave, which, imperceptible to the ordinary sense, springs in the dark bosom of the mound, against whose feet breaks the flood of the world. He who has tasted it, he who has stood on the mountain frontier of the world, and looked across in the new land, into the abode of the night. Verily, he turns not again into the tumult of the world, into the land where dwells the light in ceaseless unrest. On those heights, he builds for himself tabernacles of peace. There longs and loves and gazes across until the welcomest of all hours draws him down into the waters of the spring. Afloat above remains what is earthly and is swept back in storms. But what became holy by the touch of love runs free through hidden ways into the region beyond, where, like fragrances, it mingles with love asleep. Still wakest thou, cheerful light, that weary man to his labor, and into me pourest gladsome life. But thou wilest me not away from memory's moss-grown monument. And then I'll end with my short poem here. If you've read one of my poems, you've read them all. If you just think high diction and low places. Why lie? I need a beer. The sign held at the corner where the omens live forebodes, stepping too near a notion uncoerced. The cardboard bids us signless and circling, uphold as masters our own misfortune. That's my talk.
Thank you. Excellent. Why lie? I need a beer. I had wine. Okay. Questions, comments, etc. No need to raise hands anymore. There's still a few left. You just talk.
It was pretty it was probably pretty cryptic.
Well,
you know, but it's what, yeah, I couldn't really, I wanted to bring something to the table, but I just didn't have I didn't have it to do that. So I thought, well, I can just kind of just be honest about what came to mind, you know.
I really enjoyed hearing how things were opening, how your experiences and the texts that you were reading, or the books that you're reading, and things that you were thinking about kind of opened up in response to what we were reading in this course. I think you were making pretty cool connections.
They weren't wild associations, Doctor.
well, it's the end of the course now, so you're free. You're free again.
Thank you, Christine.
And I think an issue arises when I refer to as wild associations is when in general, because we're constantly bombarded with content, and it never coheres. Making connections is fine. We all make connections all the time. But speaking of why lie, I need a beer. Alcoholics, for example. I mean, real alcoholics. They can't keep anything apart. They see a certain bird flying, and it reminds them of something else, and they have a connection right back in this. And drug addicts are similar. If you've got sort of brain memory of drug experience, music can take you right back, etc. I think that's a bit of an issue when you don't when because we need to find coherence. I think that's one way of responding to the scatteredness of this time. So in some sense, I think Gestell has shifted. It's no longer just ordering, because that's so Heidegger describes the ordering of Gestell as eerie, how it functions and how it perfectly orders everything. Ravi is no longer here, but that's I think that's a shift. Is that there's just confusion. But to make connections, that's perfectly fine. Why not? Ideally, though, when you actually type it up, you try and somehow bring it all together. It doesn't have to be an argument. It's not an analytic philosophy paper, but in some sense, what I mean by here is that you actually begin to see something and understand yourself better, and that's what it seemed that did happen, Marin.
Very good. Well, thank you.
Okay, then Christine, it's your turn. 1 second.